Between the pages of a story that began decades ago, there exists a version of the Pokemon world that wandered a different path, where trainers faced darkness that the games could never quite show, and where the journey to become champion carried weight that felt almost too heavy for children to carry alone. This is the world of the Pokemon Manga, a narrative that twisted familiar roots into something stranger, something quieter, something that felt more like memory than adventure. Before you drift off, consider subscribing for more calm Pokemon stories, as we're getting close to 2,000 subscribers, and your support helps the journey continue. The manga begins in Pallet Town, though it feels different from the town we know from the games and anime. Red appears as a young trainer who believes he understands what strength means, teaching younger children how to catch Pokemon with a confidence that borders on arrogance. His partner is Poliwhirl, a Pokemon he trusts completely, and when a wild Nidorino appears during one of these lessons, Red demonstrates his skill without hesitation. The water gun attack strikes clean and decisive, knocking out the Nidorino and giving Red the opening to capture it in a Pokeball that closes with a click that echoes through the quiet afternoon. Red carries himself with the certainty of someone who has never truly lost, never faced a challenge that made him question whether his understanding of strength was complete. He tells the children around him that he plans to capture every Pokemon in existence, a goal so vast it feels almost impossible, yet Red speaks it as if it were inevitable. The other kids suggest visiting Professor Oak, mentioning that Oak's grandson is training to become the world's strongest trainer, but Red declines the offer with a wave of his hand. He prefers to walk his own path, to discover things without guidance, to prove that his way works without needing anyone else's approval or wisdom. The forest outside Pallet Town holds secrets that Red doesn't yet understand, and on his walk home that evening, he encounters a group of men carrying Pokeballs and speaking in hushed voices about something they call a phantom Pokemon. Red hides behind a tree, listening as they discuss a creature that no one has ever successfully captured, a being so rare that even its existence remains unconfirmed by most researchers. The words spark something in Red's chest, a curiosity that pulls him deeper into the forest, following the men from a distance until he finds himself in a clearing where another trainer is already engaged in battle. The trainer's name is Blue, though Red doesn't know this yet, and Blue's Charmander is facing off against a small pink Pokemon that moves with a grace that seems almost otherworldly. The battle unfolds with an intensity that Red recognizes immediately as something beyond a normal wild encounter, and when Blue suddenly returns Charmander to its Pokeball, Red understands that Blue has recognized something dangerous, something that suggests retreat is the wiser choice. Red emerges from the bushes, unable to resist the opportunity to face this phantom Pokemon himself, to add such a rare creature to his team and prove once again that he is the best trainer around. Blue watches from the sidelines, and there is something in his expression that Red finds irritating, a kind of knowing skepticism that suggests Blue has already predicted how this battle will end. Red sends out Poliwhirl, the partner he trusts above all others, the Pokemon that has never failed him in battle. The phantom Pokemon, which Red will later learn is called Mew, responds to Poliwhirl's water gun with a casual dodge that makes the attack look slow and clumsy. Then Mew strikes back with a single move that Red doesn't recognize, and Poliwhirl drops to the ground, knocked out instantly, the battle over before Red even understood what happened. The defeat hits Red harder than any physical blow could have. He stands frozen, staring at his unconscious Poliwhirl, unable to process what just occurred. Blue speaks then, his voice carrying an edge of mockery, as he tells Red that this loss was inevitable, that Red should have known his limitations before challenging a Pokemon so far beyond his current level. The words cut through Red's shock and leave him reeling, not with anger, but with something worse, a creeping realization that everything he believed about his own strength might have been an illusion. He doesn't respond when the Team Rocket grunts approach, too devastated by his loss to even register their presence. Red walks home in silence, his confidence shattered, his certainty about his own abilities crumbling with each step. He spends the night replaying the battle in his mind, analyzing every decision, trying to understand where he went wrong and why Poliwhirl, who had never lost before, fell so easily to this phantom Pokemon. The next morning, Red makes a decision that would have been unthinkable just a day earlier. He decides to visit Professor Oak's lab, to swallow his pride and admit that he needs guidance, that his way alone might not be enough to achieve the goal he has set for himself. The lab is empty when Red arrives, or at least it appears empty, and Red notices a Pokeball sitting on a table near the window. Inside the Pokeball is a Bulbasaur, and Red feels an immediate connection to this Pokemon, something about its energy calling to him. He is examining the Pokeball when Professor Oak enters the room, and Oak's first assumption is that Red is a thief, which is not entirely unfair, given that Red essentially broke into the lab without permission. Red's startled reaction causes him to hit a button on one of Oak's machines, and suddenly every Pokeball in the lab opens simultaneously, releasing dozens of Pokemon into the enclosed space. The afternoon dissolves into controlled chaos as Red and Professor Oak work together to recapture and return all the escaped Pokemon to their proper Pokeballs. They succeed with most of them, but when they count the total at the end, they realize one Pokemon is still missing, the Bulbasaur that Red had felt drawn to earlier. They search the lab and the surrounding area, following small clues and occasional sightings, until they track Bulbasaur to an abandoned gym in Viridian City. The gym's doors are closed, but not locked, and inside they find Bulbasaur hiding in the shadows, nervous and overwhelmed by being outside for the first time. Red approaches Bulbasaur slowly, speaking in a calm voice that acknowledges the Pokemon's fear and promises that Red will always protect his partners, that Bulbasaur has nothing to be afraid of if he trusts Red. The words seem to reach Bulbasaur, who calms down enough to stop fleeing, but the moment of peace is broken when a wild Machoke appears from deeper within the abandoned gym. The Machoke moves toward Professor Oak and Red with fists raised, clearly viewing them as intruders in its territory. Bulbasaur reacts before Red can even give a command, using Vine Whip to grab Machoke's arms and prevent the attack from landing. Red runs to the nearest window and throws it open, allowing sunlight to pour into the gym's dim interior. The light hits the bulb on Bulbasaur's back, and Red can see energy gathering there, photosynthesis happening at an accelerated rate as Bulbasaur charges up a solar beam that erupts with enough force to knock Machoke across the room. Professor Oak stands in stunned silence, impressed by the teamwork between Red and Bulbasaur despite their having just met. Oak makes a decision in that moment, recognizing something in Red that reminds him of his own younger self, and he gifts Bulbasaur to Red, saying that this Pokemon belongs with him. Oak also gives Red a Pokédex, the device that will allow him to record information about every Pokemon he encounters, officially acknowledging Red as one of his students and supporting Red's goal of catching every Pokemon in the region. Red leaves Pallet Town shortly after, beginning his journey properly for the first time, no longer just a cocky kid from a small town, but a trainer with purpose and direction. He enters Viridian Forest with his team of Poliwhirl and Bulbasaur, searching for wild Pokemon to add to his roster, when Poliwhirl emerges from a bush completely knocked out, its body burnt and unconscious. Blue steps out from behind the bush, his Charmander at his side, and Blue explains with casual indifference that he thought Poliwhirl was a wild Pokemon and attacked without checking first. Red's anger flares immediately, and he throws a punch at Blue, who blocks it easily. They stand there, locked in a physical and emotional standoff, tension crackling between them like static electricity. The confrontation is interrupted by a loud roar that echoes through the forest, and both trainers turn to see a wild Kangaskhan charging toward them, clearly agitated and ready to fight. Blue is excited rather than afraid, mentioning that he has been searching for this Kangaskhan all day, hoping to add it to his team. He sends Charmander to battle the much larger Pokémon, and Red pulls out his Pokédex to scan Kangaskhan, learning about its protective nature and its fierce strength in battle. The fight begins with Blue calling out commands, but something feels off about the Kangaskhan's behavior, an aggression that seems excessive even for a wild Pokémon defending its territory. Red notices movement behind the Kangaskhan and realizes there is a baby Kangaskhan hiding there, frightened and alone. Red stops Blue mid-battle, pointing out the baby and explaining that the adult Kangaskhan is only attacking because it's trying to protect the child. Blue hesitates, his competitive drive warring with his understanding that this isn't a fair fight, that they are essentially threatening a parent who is just trying to keep its baby safe. Red suggests that they leave the Kangaskhan alone, and Blue reluctantly agrees, returning Charmander to its Pokeball. They walk away from the encounter, and though they don't speak about it directly, there is a shift in the way they regard each other, a grudging respect beginning to form between these two rivals. The journey continues with Red and Blue frequently crossing paths, sometimes battling each other, sometimes encountering the same wild Pokemon, or arriving at the same towns within hours of each other. Red adds more Pokemon to his team, including a Pikachu that he catches after a prolonged chase through tall grass. This Pikachu becomes one of Red's most trusted partners, its electric attacks complementing the rest of his team's abilities. Red also evolves his Poliwhirl into Poliwrath, a transformation that feels significant, as if Red and his partner are both growing stronger together, learning from their losses and becoming more formidable with each battle. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off, and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. The manga's world feels larger than the game's ever suggested, with routes that stretch longer and towns that hold more complexity. Red encounters Team Rocket more frequently than he expected, their operations spread throughout the region in ways that seem coordinated and purposeful. The Grunts are not the bumbling villains from the anime, but organized criminals with dangerous Pokémon and clear objectives. Red's battles against them become progressively more difficult, requiring strategy and careful planning rather than simple brute force. One significant encounter occurs in Cerulean City, where Red meets a young girl named Misty who runs the local gym. Misty is a water-type specialist, and her battle against Red is fierce and evenly matched until Red manages to secure a victory through a combination of type advantage and clever use of Bulbasaur's grass moves. Misty is impressed by Red's skill and offers him the Cascade badge, but more importantly, she becomes an ally who Red can rely on when he needs information about Team Rocket's activities in the area. The gym battles structure Red's journey, giving him concrete goals to work toward as he travels from city to city. Each gym leader presents a unique challenge, forcing Red to adapt his strategy and sometimes adding new Pokemon to his team to cover weaknesses. The badge he earns from each victory becomes more than just a symbol of achievement. It represents growth, both for Red as a trainer and for his Pokemon as they learn new moves and evolve into stronger forms. Bulbasaur eventually evolves into Ivysaur, then later into Venusaur, becoming one of the pillars of Red's team. Blue's journey runs parallel to Red's, and though they are rivals, there is a strange sense of companionship in their competition. Blue earns his badges at roughly the same pace as Red, sometimes arriving at a gym just before Red does, other times showing up days later with a new Pokemon on his team. Blue's Charmander evolves into Charmeleon, then into Charizard, and the fire type becomes Blue's signature Pokémon, the partner he trusts above all others. Their battles against each other become events that draw crowds, with local trainers gathering to watch these two talented young men push each other to their absolute limits. A third trainer enters the narrative around the midpoint of Red's journey, a girl named Green who operates with a pragmatism that both Red and Blue find slightly unsettling. Green is focused on efficiency and results, less interested in the traditional journey of earning badges, and more interested in capturing rare Pokémon and building a team that can handle any situation. She becomes both an ally and a competitor, sometimes helping Red and Blue with information or assistance, other times appearing as an obstacle they must overcome. Green's presence adds complexity to the dynamic, creating a triangle of rivalry and cooperation that shifts depending on the circumstances. Team Rocket's activities escalate as Red progresses through his journey, and it becomes clear that the organization is searching for something specific, something that requires them to steal Pokémon and conduct experiments that most trainers would find disturbing. Red encounters hints of a larger plan, fragments of information that suggest Team Rocket is trying to create or control a Pokémon of immense power. These hints culminate in an encounter at the Sylph Company building in Saffron City, where Team Rocket has taken over the entire facility in their search for a Master Ball prototype. The battle through Sylph Company is one of the most intense sequences in the manga, with Red fighting his way up floor by floor, facing off against Team Rocket grunts and executives who are willing to use their Pokémon to the point of exhaustion to stop him. Red's team is pushed to their limits, with several Pokémon fainting during the climb, but Red refuses to give up, knowing that innocent people are being held hostage and that Team Rocket's plan must be stopped. At the top of the building, Red encounters Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, a man who treats Pokémon as tools rather than partners. Giovanni's philosophy stands in direct opposition to everything Red believes about the relationship between trainers and their Pokémon, and their battle becomes more than just a fight for control of the Sylph Company. It becomes an ideological clash, a test of whether Giovanni's ruthless efficiency can overcome Red's bond with his team. The battle is brutal and exhausting, with both trainers using every strategy and resource at their disposal. Giovanni's Pokémon are powerful and well-trained, but they lack the trust and coordination that Red's team displays, and ultimately this difference proves decisive. Red defeats Giovanni, and Team Rocket's occupation of Sylph Company ends, though Giovanni escapes before he can be captured by the authorities. Red knows this isn't the end of Team Rocket, that the organization will regroup and try again, but for now he has prevented them from obtaining the Master Ball and using it for whatever dark purpose they had planned. The victory feels hollow, though, because Red understands that this is just one battle in a larger war, and that Team Rocket's influence extends far beyond what he can see or stop on his own. The journey continues with Red earning more badges, his team growing stronger and more cohesive with each battle. He adds new Pokémon to his roster, sometimes catching them in the wild, other times receiving them as gifts from people he helps along the way. Each new addition requires training and bonding time, and Red learns that building a strong team isn't just about finding powerful Pokémon, but about understanding each one's personality and helping them grow in ways that suit their individual strengths. His Pikachu becomes particularly close to him, often staying outside of its Pokeball and riding on Red's shoulder as they travel. The eighth and final badge proves to be the most challenging, requiring Red to face Giovanni once again, this time in his role as the Viridian City gym leader. Giovanni has returned to his gym, hiding in plain sight while Team Rocket regroups elsewhere, and he challenges Red to a battle that will determine not just whether Red earns the badge, but whether Giovanni's worldview or Red's will prove stronger. The battle is even more intense than their first encounter, with Giovanni using ground-type Pokémon that exploit weaknesses in Red's team composition. Red struggles throughout the battle, his Pokémon taking heavy damage and nearly fainting multiple times, but he refuses to give up, pushing forward through sheer determination and trust in his partners. The final moments of the battle come down to Red's Pikachu against Giovanni's Raiden, an impossible matchup on paper since electric attacks are ineffective against ground types. But Red and Pikachu have fought together long enough to understand each other perfectly, and they execute a strategy that uses the environment rather than relying solely on type advantage, ultimately securing a victory that earns Red his 8th badge and forces Giovanni to acknowledge Red's strength. With all 8 badges collected, Red is eligible to compete in the Pokémon League, the annual tournament where the strongest trainers from across the region gather to determine who will become the new champion. The tournament takes place at the Indigo Plateau, a location situated at the edge of the region and accessible only to trainers who have proven themselves worthy by collecting all 8 gym badges. Red arrives at the plateau with his team at full strength, ready to face whatever challenges await him in the tournament brackets. The early rounds of the tournament pass relatively smoothly for Red, with his experience and well-trained team allowing him to advance without too much difficulty. He faces trainers who specialize in different types, each battle teaching him something new about strategy and adaptation. Blue also advances through the tournament, and it becomes clear that the two rivals are on a collision course, likely to face each other in the final rounds if they both continue winning. Green enters the tournament as well, her unconventional team and tactical approach making her a dark horse candidate who several commentators believe could surprise everyone. The tournament's structure requires trainers to battle in front of large crowds, and Red finds this aspect challenging at first, unused to performing under such public scrutiny. His battles become spectacles, with announcers calling out each move and the audience reacting to every shift in momentum. Red learns to block out the noise, to focus entirely on the battle, and trust his Pokémon to execute their strategies, regardless of external pressure. His Venusaur, Poliwrath, and Pikachu form the core of his team, with each Pokémon covering weaknesses that the others possess. Red's path through the tournament eventually brings him face to face with Green in the semifinals, a battle that tests both trainers' abilities to predict and counter each other's strategies. Green's team includes several Pokémon that Red hasn't seen her use before, and she employs tactics that keep Red constantly guessing and adjusting. The battle goes back and forth, with each trainer managing to knock out several of the other's Pokémon until it comes down to a final matchup that could go either way. Red manages to secure victory, but barely, and he knows that Green could easily have won if a few decisions had gone differently. The finals pit Red against Blue, the rivalry that has defined both of their journeys, finally reaching its climax on the tournament's biggest stage. The crowd is electric with anticipation, knowing that these two trainers have been pushing each other since the very beginning, that their battles have been some of the most intense and evenly matched of the entire tournament. Blue sends out his Ninetales, a Pokémon that Red hasn't seen him use before, and the battle begins with both trainers at their absolute best, calling out commands with perfect timing and coordination. The battle is long and exhausting, with both trainers cycling through their entire teams as Pokémon faint on both sides. Blue's Charizard faces off against Red's Venusaur in a classic matchup that should favor the fire type, but Red has prepared for this, and Venusaur's defensive capabilities and strategic use of Solar Beam keep the battle competitive. Blue responds by sending out Ninetales to engulf the battlefield in fire, attempting to overwhelm Red through raw power and type advantage. Red's team is pushed to the breaking point, with his Pikachu and Poliwrath both taking heavy damage while trying to create an opening. Red realizes that he cannot win through direct confrontation, that Blue's team is too strong and too well coordinated for Red to overcome with standard strategies. He begins setting up a complex combination move, using Poliwrath to create water vapor that forms into clouds above the battlefield. When Blue sends out his Charizard for what he believes will be the finishing blow, Red springs his trap, having Pikachu supercharge the clouds with electricity, while Venusaur uses its vines to hold Charizard in place directly beneath the storm. The resulting combination attack, water, electricity, and grass working together, strikes Charizard with overwhelming force. The arena fills with smoke and dust, and for a moment no one can see what has happened, whether Red's desperate gambit worked or whether Blue and Charizard withstood the assault. When the smoke clears, Blue is standing, his Charizard still conscious, and it appears that Blue has won. But then Blue collapses, his Charizard following him down, both of them unconscious from the delayed effects of Red's combination attack. Red stands with Pikachu, Poliwrath, and Venusaur, battered and exhausted but still conscious, officially the victor of the tournament and the new Pokémon League champion. The crowd erupts in celebration, and Red's journey toward his goal of becoming champion is complete. Green congratulates him, already on her phone calling sponsors and asking for endorsement deals now that she has placed third in the tournament. Blue eventually recovers and shakes Red's hand, acknowledging that Red earned the victory through skill and strategy. Professor Oak watches from the stands, proud of both his students and satisfied that he chose well when he gave them their first Pokémon all those months ago. The mythical Pokémon Mew watches from a hidden vantage point, observing these young trainers and the bonds they have formed with their Pokémon. Red returns to Pallet Town as champion, his name known throughout the region, and trainers begin seeking him out to challenge his title. The responsibility of being champion proves heavier than Red anticipated, with constant battles and obligations that leave him little time for his original goal of completing the Pokédex. 2 years pass in this way, with Red fulfilling his duties as champion but becoming increasingly isolated from his friends and former traveling companions. Misty tries to contact him, wanting to discuss becoming a certified gym leader, but Red is difficult to reach, always busy with another challenge or another obligation. Professor Oak begins to worry when he realizes that Red hasn't made any additions to his Pokédex in nearly 2 years, that Red seems to have abandoned the goal that originally motivated him to start his journey. Misty shares Oak's concern, noting that the last time everyone was together was at the Indigo League tournament, and that Red has been almost impossible to contact since then. Their conversation is interrupted by a sound at Oak's door, electricity crackling and sparking, and Oak assumes that Red has finally come to visit, bringing Pikachu with him as always. But when Oak opens the door, he finds only Pikachu, severely injured and barely conscious, with no sign of Red anywhere. Oak rushes to help Pikachu, bringing the Pokémon inside and doing everything he can to stabilize its condition. Pikachu is in critical condition, wounds covering its body that suggest it fought in a battle far beyond anything a normal trainer would initiate. Oak searches Pikachu's surroundings and finds a note addressed to Red, a message from the Elite Four that Oak recognizes with growing dread. The Elite Four are the strongest trainers in the region, the 4 individuals who stand between challengers and the champion, the gatekeepers who ensure that only the most skilled trainers ever reach the championship battle. But this note suggests something darker, a challenge or a confrontation that went terribly wrong. Oak can only conclude that Red fought the Elite Four and lost, that Red is currently missing and potentially in serious danger. The realization hits Oak hard, the understanding that he has no way to contact Red, no way to know if Red is even alive. Red's championship run ends not with a ceremonial passing of the title, but with an absence, a void where the champion should be, but isn't. A new door opens for a new trainer, someone who will have to climb the same mountain that Red climbed, face the same challenges, and potentially uncover what happened to the previous champion. The manga's first major arc concludes with this mystery, with Red's fate uncertain and the question of what the Elite Four did hanging unanswered in the air, like smoke that refuses to dissipate. The narrative structure of the Pokemon manga differs significantly from other adaptations of the franchise, choosing to treat its subject matter with a seriousness that the games and anime rarely attempt. Battles have consequences, with Pokemon sustaining injuries that require real recovery time, and trainers facing physical danger that feels genuinely threatening. The manga explores themes of ambition, rivalry, and the cost of pursuing strength, asking questions about what it means to be the best and whether that goal is worth the sacrifices required to achieve it. Red's character arc follows a trajectory from arrogant confidence to humbled determination to isolated responsibility, showing how the weight of being champion can become a burden rather than a reward. His relationship with his Pokemon evolves throughout the story, beginning with a somewhat transactional view of them as tools for achieving his goals and developing into genuine partnerships where mutual trust and understanding determine success or failure. The Venusaur, Poliwrath, and Pikachu that stand with Red in the final tournament battle are not just powerful Pokemon, but longtime companions who have grown alongside Red through every challenge. Blue's parallel journey serves as a mirror to Red's, showing an alternate path where similar starting conditions lead to different choices and outcomes. Blue is just as talented as Red, just as driven to become the strongest trainer, but his approach differs in subtle ways that compound over time into significant differences. Where Red learns to trust his Pokemon completely, Blue maintains a degree of emotional distance, viewing battles more analytically and less intuitively. This difference becomes the deciding factor in their final battle, where Red's willingness to take risks based on trust allows him to execute strategies that Blue's more calculated approach cannot anticipate. Green's role in the narrative provides a third perspective, someone who operates an outside the traditional trainer journey entirely. She is interested in outcomes rather than processes, in achieving her goals through whatever means are most efficient rather than following the established path of gym battles and league challenges. Her pragmatism sometimes makes her seem cold or ruthless, but it also makes her effective in ways that Red and Blue are not. She becomes wealthy through smart business decisions, using her third-place tournament finish as leverage for sponsorships and endorsements that Red and Blue never even considered. The manga's treatment of Team Rocket transforms them from a recurring nuisance into a genuine threat with clear motivations and sophisticated operations. Giovanni is not a cartoon villain, but a dangerous individual with a coherent philosophy about the relationship between humans and Pokemon. His belief that Pokemon are tools to be used for human benefit stands in direct opposition to the manga's core theme about partnerships and mutual respect. The conflicts between Red and Giovanni are not just physical battles, but ideological confrontations where different worldviews clash and only one can emerge validated. The world itself feels more dangerous and uncertain in the manga than in other adaptations, with wild Pokemon behaving more like actual wild animals and less like friendly creatures waiting to be caught. Routes between cities are genuinely hazardous, requiring preparation and caution to traverse safely. Trainers who underestimate wild Pokemon or travel alone without adequate preparation face real consequences. This sense of danger makes Red's journey feel more significant, more like a genuine accomplishment, rather than an inevitable progression through predetermined events. The manga's pacing allows for moments of quiet reflection between battles, scenes where Red sits with his Pokemon and simply exists in the world without any immediate goal or conflict. These moments provide breathing room, allowing readers to feel the weight of the journey and understand why Red's relationships with his Pokemon matter so much. The bond between Red and Pikachu develops slowly over many chapters, built through small interactions and shared experiences rather than sudden dramatic moments. By the time Pikachu arrives injured at Professor Oak's door, readers understand why this is so devastating, why the absence of Red feels like a genuine loss. The tournament arc serves as a culmination of everything the manga has been building toward, bringing together all the major characters and resolving conflicts that have been developing since the very beginning. The battles are long and detailed, showing multiple exchanges and strategies rather than simple move by move descriptions. The emotional stakes are high because readers have followed these characters through their entire journey and understand what victory or defeat means for each of them. When Red stands as champion at the end, the moment feels earned in a way that quick victories never do. The manga's ending, with Red's disappearance and Pikachu's injuries, transforms what could have been a simple triumphant conclusion into something more complex and unsettling. Red achieved his goal of becoming champion, but the cost of maintaining that position ultimately proves too high. The 2 years of isolation, constant battles, and growing responsibilities wear Red down until he finally faces a challenge he cannot overcome. The Elite Four, previously just names and distant figures, become symbols of a system that devours even its champions, that demands more than any individual can sustainably provide. Professor Oak's horror at realizing what has happened to Red connects back to his own history as a former champion, suggesting that Oak understands the pressures Red faced because Oak experienced them himself. Oak's decision to give Red a Pokedex and encourage his journey takes on darker implications when viewed through this lens, as if Oak knowingly sent Red down a path that Oak knows leads to isolation and eventual destruction. The guilt Oak feels when Pikachu collapses at his door is not just worry for Red's safety, but recognition of his own complicity in creating the circumstances that led to Red's disappearance. Misty's concern about Red's isolation and her attempts to contact him show that others recognized something was wrong long before the situation reached its breaking point. The fact that Red didn't respond to her messages, didn't follow up on helping her become a certified gym leader, suggests that Red was already struggling under the weight of his responsibilities. The championships that seemed like the ultimate goal at the beginning of the manga reveals itself to be just another stage in a longer journey, one that Red may not have been prepared to handle despite all his strength and skill. The note from the Elite Four creates more questions than it answers, leaving readers to speculate about what exactly happened between Red and these four powerful trainers. Did they challenge Red as part of some official proceeding, or was this confrontation something more sinister? Did Red lose in a fair battle, or was he ambushed and overwhelmed? The manga provides no clear answers, allowing the uncertainty to linger and creating a sense of unease about what the Elite Four represent and what their role in Red's disappearance truly was. The manga's treatment of evolution differs from other adaptations by making it feel more significant and permanent. A transformation that changes not just a Pokemon's appearance, but its entire relationship with its trainer. When Poliwhirl evolves into Poliwrath, Red has to relearn how to battle with this partner, adjusting to new moves and new capabilities. When Bulbasaur becomes Ivysaur and then Venusaur, each evolution marks a new chapter in their partnership, a deepening of their bond, and a recognition of their shared growth. The manga treats evolution as a milestone that both trainer and Pokemon work toward together rather than something that happens automatically. The Pokédex serves as more than just a gameplay device in the manga, functioning as a symbol of Red's original goal and a measure of how far he has strayed from that goal by the story's end. Professor Oak gives Red the Pokédex to support Red's dream of catching every Pokémon, but by the time Red becomes champion, the Pokédex is forgotten, left incomplete as Red becomes consumed by his responsibilities as champion. The 2 years of no additions to the Pokédex represent 2 years of Red abandoning his original dream in favor of fulfilling duties that bring him no joy. Blue's Charizard serves as a parallel to Red's Venusaur, two final evolutions of the starter Pokemon that Professor Oak gave to each trainer at the beginning of their journeys. The fact that their final battle comes down to these two Pokemon feels appropriate, a return to their origins, and a recognition of how far both trainers have come. The manga emphasizes that Blue's Charizard is not weaker than Red's Venusaur, despite the type disadvantage, that Blue has trained his partner to overcome natural weaknesses and fight at the highest level regardless of matchup. Green's absence from the final battle's climax reflects her different priorities and approach to the trainer journey. While Red and Blue are locked in their rivalry, competing for the championship and the recognition that comes with it, Green is already thinking about what comes next, about how to translate tournament success into financial security and business opportunities. Her immediate phone calls to sponsors after placing third show a pragmatism that neither Red nor Blue possess, a recognition that there are multiple ways to define success beyond just being the strongest trainer. The manga's art style contributes significantly to its tone, with detailed battle sequences and expressive character designs that convey emotion and intensity in ways that text alone cannot. The panel layouts during important battles often show multiple perspectives and moments simultaneously, creating a sense of chaos and speed that matches the urgency of the conflicts. Quieter moments feature simpler compositions with more negative space, allowing readers to breathe and process what they have just witnessed before the story moves forward again. The decision to end the first major arc with Red's disappearance, rather than his victory celebration, creates a sense of incompleteness that mirrors the incompleteness of Red's Pokédex. Just as Red never fulfilled his original goal of catching every Pokémon, readers never get the closure of seeing Red enjoy his championship or pass on his title in a formal ceremony. The abrupt ending, with Pikachu injured and Red missing, transforms the entire narrative into something more ambiguous, less a story of triumph and more a meditation on the costs of ambition and the loneliness that comes with reaching the summit of any competitive field. Mew's occasional appearances throughout the manga serve as reminders of the phantom Pokemon that Red first encountered in the forest outside Pallet Town, the battle that shattered Red's confidence and forced him to acknowledge his limitations. Mew watching Red's final tournament battle suggests that this mythical Pokemon has been observing Red's journey the entire time, perhaps evaluating whether Red has grown strong enough to challenge it again. The fact that Mew flies away at the end without confronting Red implies that their story is not finished, that there is still more for Red to achieve or learn before they meet again. The manga's exploration of what happens after someone achieves their dream makes it unique among Pokemon narratives. Most stories end with the protagonist becoming champion, treating that achievement as the natural conclusion to the journey. This manga continues past that point, showing that becoming champion is not an ending, but a beginning of an entirely new set of challenges and responsibilities. Red's isolation and eventual disappearance suggest that the dream he chased so relentlessly may not have been worth the sacrifices required to achieve it, that there was something he failed to understand about what being champion would actually mean for his life. The relationship between Red, Blue, and Green forms the emotional core of the manga, Three different approaches to the same goal, creating a dynamic that drives the narrative forward. They are competitors, but also companions, the only people who truly understand what each other is experiencing because they are walking parallel paths. The manga explores how rivalry can coexist with respect, how people can push each other to become better while still genuinely caring about each other's well being. The handshake between Red and Blue after their final battle contains more emotion and meaning than pages of dialogue could convey. Professor Oak's role as mentor and authority figure evolves throughout the manga, from someone who provides starter Pokemon and Pokedexes to someone who carries the weight of knowing what awaits his students if they succeed in becoming champions. His concern for Red at the end stems from his understanding that the path Red has walked leads to isolation and eventual burnout, that the system that creates champions also destroys them. Oak's failure to intervene or warn Red more explicitly becomes something he must live with, a regret that he may carry for the rest of his life. The gym leaders appear briefly throughout Red's journey, each presenting a unique challenge that forces Red to adapt and grow. The manga treats them with more respect than other adaptations, showing them as skilled trainers who take their roles seriously, rather than simply obstacles for the protagonist to overcome. Misty's friendship with Red develops beyond their initial gym battle into a genuine connection, making her concern about his isolation more impactful because readers understand that she is not just a gym leader worried about a champion, but a friend worried about someone she cares about. Team Rocket's experiments and operations hint at darker corners of the Pokemon world that the manga only partially explores, suggesting that there are aspects of the relationship between humans and Pokemon that raise ethical questions without easy answers. Giovanni's belief that Pokemon should be used as tools is presented as genuinely held philosophy rather than simple villainy, forcing readers to consider why they believe the alternative is better. The manga never explicitly resolves this ideological conflict, leaving it as an open question that each reader must answer for themselves. The Indigo Plateau represents the endpoint of traditional trainer journeys, the location where everything culminates and the strongest trainers gather. The manga's description of the plateau emphasizes its isolation and difficulty of access, making it feel like a sacred or forbidden place that only the worthy can reach. The tournament itself becomes a ritual, a formal process where trainers prove themselves through battle, and the entire region watches to see who will emerge as champion. Red's victory in this ritual should feel triumphant, but the manga's ending recontextualizes it as the beginning of his downfall rather than the apex of his achievement. The combination move that Red uses to defeat Blue showcases the manga's approach to battles as requiring creativity and trust rather than simple type advantages or brute force. Red's ability to coordinate Poliwrath, Pikachu, and Venusaur in executing a complex strategy under pressure demonstrates the depth of his bond with his team and his growth as a strategist. The fact that Blue nearly counters this strategy shows that he is Red's equal in skill, and that the outcome could easily have gone differently, with small changes in timing or execution. The manga's treatment of Pokemon as genuine partners, rather than pets or tools, creates emotional stakes that make battles feel more significant. When a Pokemon faints in battle, it is not just a game mechanic, but a moment of pain for both the Pokemon and its trainer. The injuries that Pokemon sustain require healing and rest, creating a sense of vulnerability and fragility that makes victories feel more hard-won. Red's concern for his team's well-being becomes a defining character trait, showing that he values his partners beyond their utility in battle. The 2-year time skip between Red's championship victory and his disappearance allows the manga to explore the aftermath of achieving a major goal without devoting extensive page time to it. The skip implies, or rather than shows, Red's growing isolation, his increasing inability to maintain connections with the people who supported him during his journey. The fact that no one has heard from Red in nearly 2 years suggests that something fundamental changed in him after becoming champion, that the person who stood at the Indigo Plateau accepting his victory was already beginning to slip away from the relationships that had sustained him. Pikachu's arrival at Professor Oak's door, injured and alone, transforms what could have been a triumphant narrative into a tragedy. The fact that Pikachu managed to escape whatever happened to Red and make it all the way back to Pallet Town despite its injuries shows the depth of Pikachu's determination and loyalty. Pikachu's unconsciousness prevents it from explaining what happened, leaving Oak and Misty to piece together the situation from fragmentary evidence and their own fears about what the Elite Four might have done. The Elite Four's role as the final challenge before the champion creates an interesting dynamic where they serve as gatekeepers, but also potential threats to the champion they are supposed to protect. The manga implies that there is more to their relationship with champions than simply providing challenging battles, that there may be political or organizational complexities that Red either didn't understand or couldn't navigate successfully. The note they sent to Red suggests premeditation, a planned confrontation rather than a chance encounter, which raises questions about what authority or right they have to challenge a sitting champion. The manga's ending opens up numerous possibilities for continuation while also functioning as a complete narrative arc in its own right. Red's journey from cocky kid to champion to missing person forms a complete trajectory that explores themes of ambition, isolation, and the costs of success. Whether Red ever returns, what happened during his confrontation with the Elite Four, and who will become the next champion are questions that could drive future arcs, while also allowing the first arc to stand alone as a meditation on what it means to achieve your dreams, and then discover that achievement alone isn't enough. The Pokemon manga's approach to storytelling differs from its contemporaries in fundamental ways that become more apparent the longer one spends with the material. Where other adaptations present a world where conflict resolves cleanly and victories feel permanent, the manga embraces ambiguity and complexity, allowing situations to remain unresolved and acknowledging that some problems cannot be solved through a single battle or heroic gesture. This willingness to sit with uncertainty creates a reading experience that feels more mature, more willing to treat its audience as capable of handling stories without tidy conclusions. The art of the manga evolves noticeably over the course of Red's arc, with early chapters featuring simpler character designs and less detailed backgrounds that gradually give way to more sophisticated compositions and intricate panel layouts. This visual evolution mirrors Red's own growth, as if the manga itself is maturing alongside its protagonist. Battle sequences become more dynamic and easier to follow as the artist develops techniques for showing movement and impact, while quieter character moments benefit from more expressive facial work that conveys emotion without requiring extensive dialogue. The pacing of individual chapters demonstrates careful attention to rhythm and flow, with action sequences balanced against slower moments that allow characters to reflect on recent events and prepare for what comes next. The manga avoids the common pitfall of endless escalation, where each battle must be more spectacular than the last, instead focusing on making each confrontation feel significant because of its context and emotional stakes, rather than its scale. A small battle between Red and a wild Pokemon early in his journey can carry as much weight as his final tournament match against Blue, because both represent important moments in Red's development as a trainer. The manga's treatment of Pokeballs as physical objects with weight and presence adds a subtle layer of realism to the world. Trainers carry their Pokeballs in bags or on belts, and the act of throwing a Pokeball requires actual physical effort, rather than being a simple button press. This attention to physical detail extends to the Pokemon themselves, who show signs of fatigue and exhaustion during prolonged battles, who require rest and healing after taking damage, who cannot simply be swapped in and out of combat without consequence. The manga treats its world as a place where actions have lasting effects, rather than resetting to a baseline state after each chapter. The relationship between humans and Pokemon in the manga contains darker undertones that are rarely explored in other adaptations. Team Rocket's experiments hint at possibilities for exploitation and abuse that the manga acknowledges without dwelling on extensively, creating an awareness that the world contains people who view Pokemon as resources to be extracted rather than partners to be respected. Giovanni's philosophy represents an extreme version of this utilitarian view, but the manga suggests that even well-meaning trainers must constantly examine their own motivations and ensure they are not treating their Pokemon as mere tools for achieving personal goals. Red's arc can be read as a warning about the dangers of single-minded ambition, about what happens when someone defines themselves entirely through external achievements rather than internal growth or meaningful relationships. Red's goal of becoming champion consumes him to the point where he neglects his original dream of completing the Pokédex, abandons his friendships, and ultimately isolates himself so completely that when he faces his greatest challenge, he faces it alone without anyone even knowing he is in danger. The manga suggests that Red's greatest failure is not his defeat by the Elite Four, but his inability to maintain the connections that gave his journey meaning in the first place. Blue's character arc runs parallel to Red's, but diverges in ways that become more significant over time. Blue starts with many of the same flaws as Red, the same arrogance and certainty that he knows best, but Blue's experiences humble him in different ways than Red's do. Blue's rivalry with Red pushes both of them to improve, but Blue seems to retain more awareness of life beyond battling, maintaining relationships with his grandfather, Professor Oak, and appearing less consumed by his role as a trainer. The fact that Blue can accept defeat in the tournament finals with grace and genuine congratulations suggests that Blue has achieved a kind of emotional maturity that Red, despite his victory, has not. Green's storyline introduces questions about gender and opportunity in the Pokemon world that the manga explores more thoroughly than other adaptations. Green faces challenges and obstacles that Red and Blue do not simply because she is female, and she responds to these barriers not with anger, but with pragmatic adaptation, finding alternate paths to success that do not rely on the traditional trainer journey structure. Her decision to focus on business and sponsorships rather than pursuing the championship demonstrates that there are multiple ways to define success and that the path that works for Red may not be the only valuable option. The gym system in the manga functions as both a training structure and a gatekeeping mechanism that determines who is permitted to advance toward the Pokemon League. Each gym leader serves as a test of not just battle skill, but also character, evaluating whether challengers possess the qualities necessary to represent the region as champion. The badges themselves carry symbolic weight beyond their practical function of granting access to the league, representing milestones in a trainer's journey and markers of growth that are recognized and respected throughout the region. The Pokédex transforms from a simple recording device into a symbol of the relationship between trainers and the scholarly community that studies Pokémon. Professor Oak's decision to entrust Red with a Pokédex represents Oak's recognition that Red has the potential to contribute to the collective understanding of Pokémon rather than simply using them for personal gain. The fact that Red eventually abandons his Pokédex work to focus on maintaining his championship represents a betrayal not just of his own goals, but of the trust that Oak placed in him. Team Rocket's role in the narrative extends beyond simple antagonism to explore questions about the ethics of Pokemon training and the potential for abuse within a system that normalizes capturing wild creatures and using them in battles. Giovanni's belief that Pokemon should serve human purposes is presented as genuinely held rather than cartoonishly evil, forcing the manga to articulate why the alternative philosophy of partnership and mutual respect is superior. The manga never reduces this to a simple answer, instead allowing the conflict between these worldviews to remain an ongoing tension that each character must navigate in their own way. The Sylph Company arc represents a turning point in Red's journey where his personal quest intersects with larger societal problems that cannot be solved through individual action alone. Red's decision to confront Team Rocket at Sylph Company stems from his sense of justice and his understanding that some situations require intervention regardless of the risk. But the arc also reveals the limits of what a single trainer, no matter how skilled, can accomplish against an organized criminal enterprise. Red's victory feels significant, but incomplete because Team Rocket survives and will continue causing problems even after Red has moved on. The tournament structure creates a formal context for battles that differ significantly from wild encounters or gym challenges. Tournament battles occur in front of large audiences, with judges and referees ensuring fair play, transforming private contests of skill into public spectacles. The pressure of performing under these conditions affects different trainers in different ways, with some thriving on the energy of the crowd and others finding it distracting. Red's ability to block out external noise and focus entirely on the battle demonstrates both his skill and his increasing tendency toward isolation. The manga's treatment of victory and defeat avoids the binary thinking common in many stories, acknowledging that most outcomes contain elements of both success and failure. Red wins the tournament, but loses his connection to the goals and relationships that made the journey meaningful. Blue loses the final battle, but maintains his dignity and his relationship with his grandfather. Green places third, but achieves financial success that neither Red nor Blue considered. The manga suggests that how one responds to outcomes matters more than the outcomes themselves. The 2-year time skip functions as a narrative device that allows the manga to explore consequences without showing every step of the process that leads to those consequences. The gap between Red's championship victory and his disappearance creates space for readers to imagine what that period was like, to fill in the details of Red's growing isolation and increasing burden. The manga provides just enough information through Misty and Professor Oak's conversation to establish that something has gone wrong without spelling out exactly what happened, trusting readers to understand the implications. Pikachu's journey back to Professor Oak's lab, while severely injured, represents an act of loyalty and determination that speaks to the depth of the bond between Pokemon and trainers. The fact that Pikachu made this journey alone, without Red, suggests that Pikachu either escaped from whatever confrontation occurred or was specifically sent by Red to seek help. Either interpretation adds layers of tragedy to the moment, as Pikachu's arrival confirms that something terrible has happened while simultaneously providing no clear information about Red's current status or location. The Elite Four exist in the manga as shadowy figures whose motivations and methods remain largely unexplored in Red's arc, creating an aura of mystery and potential threat that hangs over the entire narrative. Their note to Red suggests that they initiated contact rather than Red seeking them out, implying that the confrontation was not a traditional challenge, but something more complex. The manga's decision to leave this encounter off-page transforms the Elite Four into symbols of the system that creates and potentially destroys champions rather than fully developed characters. Professor Oak's reaction to discovering what has happened to Red reveals depths to his character that earlier chapters only hinted at. His horror and guilt suggest that Oak has seen this pattern before, that he understands what happens to champions who cannot handle the pressure and isolation that comes with the title. Oak's role shifts from mentor and authority figure to someone who carries the weight of having encouraged young trainers down a path that he knows can lead to destruction. The manga implies that Oak may have been trying to protect Red through his initial reluctance to accept him as a student, knowing where that acceptance might ultimately lead. The manga's conclusion creates a sense of incompleteness that mirrors real life's refusal to provide neat endings to complex situations. Red's story does not end with his tournament victory or his disappearance, but continues somewhere off page, in a space that readers cannot access directly. This narrative choice respects Red as a character who exists beyond the boundaries of the story being told, whose life continues even when the manga is not following him. The open ending invites readers to imagine what might come next, while also acknowledging that some questions cannot be answered definitively. The bond between trainer and Pokemon in the manga develops through shared experience and mutual trust, rather than through abstract concepts of friendship or destiny. Red's relationship with Venusaur begins with a mistake, an accidental meeting in Professor Oak's lab that could have gone very differently, but grows into partnership through repeated battles and quiet moments of rest. The manga shows the work required to build and maintain these relationships, the daily interactions and small gestures of care that accumulate over time into something profound. The tournament's significance extends beyond determining who becomes champion to serving as a cultural event that brings together trainers, spectators, and Pokemon from across the entire region. The Indigo Plateau transforms into a temporary city during the tournament, with vendors, accommodations, and entertainment creating a festival atmosphere. The manga uses this setting to show the Pokemon world at its most vibrant and diverse, while also highlighting the intense pressure placed on the tournament participants who must perform in this highly visible context. Blue's Ninetales emerges as a key member of his team during the tournament, a Pokemon that readers have not seen him use extensively in earlier chapters. This introduction of a powerful new team member late in Blue's arc suggests that Blue has been training and developing Pokemon off-page, that his journey has continued even during periods when the manga was not following him directly. The Ninetales serves as a reminder that each character in the manga has their own story occurring simultaneously with Red's, their own challenges and growth happening in spaces that readers only occasionally glimpse. Red's combination move that defeats Blue represents the culmination of everything Red has learned about coordination and trust throughout his journey. The move requires perfect timing and complete faith in his Pokemon's ability to execute their parts of the strategy, and the fact that it succeeds demonstrates how far Red and his team have come since the beginning of their journey together. The manga emphasizes that this victory is not Red's alone, but belongs equally to Pikachu, Poliwrath, and Venusaur, acknowledging their agency and contribution, rather than treating them as mere extensions of Red's will. The crowd's reaction to the tournament final captures the public's investment in these two trainers and their rivalry, which has apparently been followed by spectators throughout the region. Red and Blue have become public figures through their journeys and tournament victories, their battles transformed into entertainment that people discuss and analyze. This public dimension adds another layer to the championship, making it not just a personal achievement, but a role with societal expectations and obligations that Red will struggle to fulfill. Professor Oak's pride in watching his students compete at the highest level is tempered by his understanding of what awaits the victor, creating a bittersweet quality to his observation of the final battle. He celebrates Red's victory while also knowing that this achievement marks the beginning of a difficult period in Red's life, one that Oak cannot protect him from despite his desire to do so. The manga suggests that this tension between wanting to support young trainers and knowing the challenges they will face is something that Oak has lived with throughout his career. Mew's presence throughout the narrative serves as a thread connecting Red's beginning to his end, the mythical Pokemon that humbled Red in the forest and now watches as Red achieves championship. The fact that Mew flies away, rather than confronting Red again, suggests that their story is incomplete, that there is still some lesson Red needs to learn or some challenge he must overcome before he is ready to face this phantom Pokemon again. Mew becomes a symbol of the gap between where Red is and where he needs to be, a reminder that becoming champion is not the same as becoming the best. The manga's treatment of time feels different from other adaptations, with chapters allowing space for travel and rest rather than jumping immediately from one significant event to the next. Red's journey from town to town takes days or weeks rather than happening instantly, and the manga sometimes shows these periods of travel, using them to develop character relationships and allow Red to reflect on recent experiences. This pacing creates a sense of the journey as something that unfolds gradually rather than rushing toward predetermined plot points. The physical toll of training and battling appears consistently throughout the manga, with trainers and Pokemon both showing signs of exhaustion and requiring recovery time after intense battles. Red develops calluses on his hands from throwing Pokeballs repeatedly, and his team members sustain injuries that take time to heal properly. This attention to physical reality grounds the fantasy elements and creates stakes that feel genuine, where decisions have consequences that cannot be immediately reversed or undone. The relationship between gym leaders and the broader Pokemon League system receives more attention in the manga than in most other adaptations, showing how gym leaders serve as gatekeepers who evaluate challengers' readiness to advance. Each gym leader takes this responsibility seriously, understanding that their role is not simply to provide challenging battles, but to ensure that only trainers with the right combination of skill and character earn badges. Misty's decision to give Red his badge comes after careful evaluation of not just his battle ability, but his treatment of his Pokemon and his motivations for seeking the championship. Red's Pokédex remains incomplete at the end of his arc, a symbol of how his original goal became lost as he pursued the championship with increasing single-mindedness. The Pokédex's incompleteness represents Red's failure to maintain balance in his life, to remember that there were multiple things he wanted to accomplish rather than just the single goal of becoming champion. Professor Oak's disappointment about the lack of Pokédex updates stems not from anger, but from sadness that Red has lost sight of what initially motivated him to begin his journey. The manga's use of chapter breaks and volume divisions creates natural pauses in the narrative that allow readers to process what they have experienced before continuing. These breaks serve a function similar to the rest periods that Red and his Pokemon take during their journey, providing space for reflection and integration. The manga's structure acknowledges that stories, like journeys, benefit from rhythm and pacing rather than constant forward momentum. Green's pragmatic approach to the trainer journey includes elements of manipulation and deception that Red and Blue find morally questionable, creating friction between the three trainers that never fully resolves. Green sees nothing wrong with using information advantages or taking shortcuts when they advance her goals, while Red and Blue maintain a more traditional view of how trainers should conduct themselves. The manga does not resolve this conflict by declaring one approach superior, instead allowing different philosophies to coexist and letting readers draw their own conclusions. The tournament's organizational structure, with elimination brackets and scheduled matches, transforms spontaneous trainer battles into something more formal and rigid. Trainers must adapt to fighting on schedule rather than when they feel ready, and the single elimination format means that one loss ends their tournament run regardless of their overall skill level. This structure creates drama and tension, but also feels somewhat arbitrary, as if the championship is determined partly by skill and partly by luck of the draw and timing. Red's isolation during his championship period manifests in small details that readers piece together from Misty and Professor Oak's conversation. The fact that Red stopped responding to messages, stopped updating his Pokedex, and stopped making public appearances suggests a gradual withdrawal that began long before his confrontation with the Elite Four. The manga implies that Red's disappearance was the culmination of a longer process of disconnection rather than a sudden, unexpected event. The manga's exploration of what it means to be the best trainer includes examining whether such a designation is even meaningful or achievable. Red's victory in the tournament makes him the official champion, but the manga suggests that this title is more symbolic than absolute, that there are always more challenges and stronger opponents waiting beyond any particular achievement. The Elite Four's confrontation with Red implies that even the championship is not a final destination, but merely another step in an endless progression of increasingly difficult challenges. Professor Oak's laboratory functions as a safe space throughout the manga, a location where trainers can rest and receive guidance without judgment or pressure. Oak's role as mentor extends beyond simply providing starter Pokemon to offering emotional support and wisdom gained from his own experiences. The fact that Pikachu returns to Oak's lab when in danger suggests that even Red's Pokemon understood that Oak represents safety and help in a world that can be hostile and dangerous. The manga's treatment of battles emphasizes strategy and adaptation over raw power, showing that victory often comes from understanding an opponent's weaknesses and responding to changing circumstances rather than simply having the strongest Pokemon. Red's battles against gym leaders and other trainers showcase his growing ability to read situations and make tactical decisions under pressure, skills that prove just as important as his Pokemon's power levels. The relationship between Red and Blue evolves from simple rivalry into something more complex and nuanced, incorporating elements of friendship, respect, and genuine care despite their competition. Their handshake after the final battle contains acknowledgement that they have pushed each other to become better trainers, that their rivalry has been beneficial for both of them, even though only one could win the tournament. The manga suggests that rivalry and friendship need not be mutually exclusive, that competition can coexist with genuine affection and respect. Blue's grandfather's identity as Professor Oak creates additional layers to Blue's journey, adding pressure to succeed and live up to family expectations, while also providing advantages like early access to information and resources. The manga explores how Blue navigates this complicated position, trying to prove himself through his own merit while benefiting from nepotistic advantages that he did not ask for but cannot fully reject. The tournament audience includes ordinary people from across the region who have traveled to the Indigo Plateau specifically to watch these battles, transforming the championship into a shared cultural experience. The manga shows glimpses of spectators discussing strategy, making predictions, and reacting emotionally to the battles, emphasizing that the tournament matters beyond the immediate participants. These battles become stories that people tell and retell, shaping how the region understands excellence and competition. Green's third place finish positions her perfectly for the business opportunities she pursues, high enough to be newsworthy and impressive, but without the overwhelming pressure that comes with being champion. Her immediate phone calls to sponsors demonstrate planning and foresight that Red and Blue lack, a recognition that tournament success has a limited window of relevance, and must be converted into long-term opportunities quickly. The manga presents Green's approach as equally valid to Red and Blue's, just oriented toward different measures of success. Red's final stand against Blue, supported by Pikachu, Poliwrath, and Venusaur, represents a return to his core team rather than cycling through a full roster of 6 Pokémon. This choice emphasizes the depth of Red's bond with these particular partners, his trust in their ability to execute complex strategies, and his willingness to stake everything on Pokémon he has known since the beginning of his journey rather than more recently acquired additions to his team. The manga's conclusion invites interpretation and analysis rather than providing explicit explanations for every event and character motivation. The note from the Elite Four could be threatening, could be an official summons, could be something else entirely, and the manga provides insufficient information to determine with certainty which interpretation is correct. This ambiguity respects readers' intelligence and allows the story to remain open to multiple readings. The 2-year period during which Red serves as champion occurs almost entirely off-page, condensed into a few lines of dialogue that hint at what this period was like without showing it directly. This narrative choice keeps the focus on the beginning and end of Red's arc while acknowledging that the middle period, though important, would be repetitive and less dramatically interesting than the journey that led to the championship or the crisis that ended it. Pikachu's injuries, when it arrives at Professor Oak's door, suggest a battle of significant intensity and violence, far beyond what normally occurs in sanctioned trainer battles. The severity of these injuries implies that whatever confrontation Red faced involved Pokémon being pushed beyond safe limits, potentially fighting for their survival rather than simply for victory. This violence marks a tonal shift from the rest of the manga, suggesting that Red has entered territory where the usual rules and protections no longer apply. The manga's structure allows for character development to occur gradually across many chapters, rather than through sudden revelations or dramatic transformations. Red's growth from arrogant beginner to humble student to isolated champion happens in increments, with each battle and each interaction adding layers to his understanding of what it means to be a trainer. This gradual approach creates a sense of earned progression, where changes in character feel organic rather than imposed by narrative necessity. The role of chance and luck in Red's journey appears in small moments that could easily have gone differently, creating a sense that his success is not inevitable but contingent on countless small factors aligning in his favor. The decision to check Professor Oak's lab at the specific moment when Bulbasaur needed help, the encounter with Blue in the forest that led to seeing Mew, the bracket placement in the tournament that determined which trainers he faced and when, all of these elements could have changed the trajectory of Red's journey significantly. Blue's development of Ninetales occurs largely off-page, suggesting that he has continued training and catching Pokémon during periods when the manga focuses on Red. This parallel progression reminds readers that Blue is the protagonist of his own story, with his own challenges and discoveries occurring simultaneously with Red's journey. The tournament reveals the results of Blue's efforts, showing that he has been working just as hard as Red, even when readers were not watching him directly. The manga's treatment of Professor Oak as a former champion creates interesting parallels between Oak's past and Red's present, suggesting that the isolation and eventual disappearance that Red experiences may be patterns that repeat across generations of champions. Oak's decision to step back from active training and focus on research represents one possible path for dealing with the pressures of championship, a choice that Red may not have known was available or may not have been willing to consider. Green's business acumen and focus on financial success introduce economic considerations that most Pokémon narratives ignore entirely, acknowledging that trainers need to support themselves financially and that tournament success can be converted into material security. Her approach treats the trainer journey as a career rather than purely as a personal quest, bringing pragmatic considerations into a narrative that otherwise focuses primarily on emotional and competitive elements. The relationship between trainers and their Pokemon in the manga includes moments of disagreement and misunderstanding, acknowledging that perfect harmony is not always possible or realistic. Red sometimes makes decisions that his Pokemon question, and his partners sometimes act independently in ways that surprise or concern him. These friction points add texture to the relationships and prevent them from feeling idealized or unrealistic. The tournament's organizational requirements, including weigh ins, health checks, and rule explanations, create a bureaucratic layer that sits awkwardly alongside the more romantic notion of trainer journeys as personal quests for self discovery. The manga does not dwell on these practical details, but their presence reminds readers that the Pokemon League operates as an actual organization with regulations and procedures that must be followed. Red's decision to use his original team of Pikachu, Poliwrath, and Venusaur in the final battle against Blue represents both a strategic choice and an emotional statement, showing that Red values the history and trust he has built with these partners over the raw power that newer, perhaps stronger Pokemon might provide. This choice prioritizes relationship over optimization, sentiment over pure tactical advantage. The crowd's investment in the final battle between Red and Blue suggests that their rivalry has been followed by spectators throughout their journey, that stories of their previous encounters have spread and created anticipation for this final confrontation. The tournament thus serves not just as a competition, but as a culmination of narratives that have been developing throughout the region, bringing together storylines that the audience has been invested in for an extended period. Blue's graceful acceptance of defeat demonstrates emotional maturity that contrasts with his earlier arrogance, showing that he has grown not just as a battler, but as a person capable of acknowledging when he has been beaten fairly. His congratulations to Red feel genuine rather than perfunctory, reflecting real respect for Red's skill and the effort that both trainers put into their final battle. Professor Oak's complex emotions, watching the final battle, pride mixed with concern, reflect his understanding that Red's victory will bring new challenges that may ultimately prove more difficult than any he faced during his journey to the championship. Oak's inability to warn Red explicitly about what awaits him suggests either that Oak believes Red must discover these challenges for himself, or that Oak lacks the words to adequately prepare someone for the isolation and pressure that comes with being champion. Mew's observation of the final battle positions this mythical Pokemon as an almost supernatural presence that appears at significant moments in Red's journey, watching and evaluating but not intervening directly. The manga does not explain Mew's interest in Red or what criteria Mew is using to judge whether Red is worthy of another confrontation, leaving this relationship mysterious and unresolved. The 2-year gap between Red's championship and his disappearance represents a significant period of Red's life that readers do not witness directly, creating a void in the narrative that invites speculation about what happened during this time. The manga provides just enough information to establish that Red's situation deteriorated during this period without showing the specific steps of that deterioration, trusting readers to imagine the gradual process of isolation and pressure building until something finally breaks. Misty's concern about Red's silence extends beyond simple worry about a friend to include professional concerns about his role as champion and his responsibilities to support new gym leaders like herself. Her frustration at being unable to contact Red suggests that she has been trying for some time to reach him, that Red's isolation did not happen suddenly but developed gradually as he became increasingly unreachable. The note from the Elite Four transforms from a simple piece of paper into a symbol of the system's potential threat to champions who cannot meet its expectations or follow its unstated rules. The manga's decision not to show the content of this note leaves its exact meaning ambiguous, allowing readers to imagine various scenarios that might explain what prompted the Elite Four to contact Red and what led to the confrontation that left Pikachu injured and Red missing. Professor Oak's conclusion that Red was defeated by the Elite Four comes from his interpretation of available evidence rather than from certain knowledge, showing Oak making assumptions based on his understanding of how the system works and what he knows about the Elite Four's role. This interpretation might be correct, might be partially correct, or might be entirely wrong, and the manga does not provide enough information to determine which possibility is accurate. The manga's ending on an ambiguous note, rather than a resolution, creates an open-ended quality that allows the story to continue in readers' imaginations beyond the final page. Red's fate remains unknown, his location undiscovered, and the question of what exactly happened during his confrontation with the Elite Four left unanswered. This narrative choice treats readers as active participants who can imagine their own conclusions rather than passive consumers of a predetermined story. The physical journey that Red completes, traveling from Pallet Town through various routes and cities to the Indigo Plateau, mirrors an internal journey of self-discovery and growth that proves to be more complex and ambiguous than the external one. While Red successfully reaches his destination and achieves his goal of becoming champion, the internal journey of understanding what he truly wants and what price he is willing to pay for success remains incomplete at the manga's conclusion. Bulbasaur's evolution into Venusaur occurs across multiple chapters, each stage of evolution representing not just increased power, but also changes in the relationship between Venusaur and Red. The manga shows how evolution requires adjustment periods where trainer and Pokémon must relearn how to work together with new abilities and different physical capabilities, treating evolution as a process with psychological dimensions rather than simply a power upgrade. The gym leaders, Red faces during his journey, each represent different philosophies about training and different challenges that require Red to adapt and grow. Some gym leaders prioritize raw power, others focus on strategy and type advantage, and still others test Red's understanding of his Pokemon's individual strengths and weaknesses. Each battle teaches Red something new about being a trainer, contributing to his overall development in ways that extend beyond simply earning badges. Team Rocket's continued presence throughout Red's journey creates a sense of ongoing threat that does not resolve with any single victory, acknowledging that criminal organizations are resilient and capable of surviving setbacks that would destroy less organized groups. Giovanni's escape after the Sylph Company incident ensures that Team Rocket remains a potential threat even after Red has become champion, suggesting that some conflicts cannot be permanently resolved through individual action alone. The tournament bracket system creates a structure where trainers must win multiple battles in succession to advance, testing not just their skill, but also their stamina and their ability to maintain focus across multiple days of competition. This format favors trainers who can manage their Pokemon's health and energy across multiple battles, rather than those who might be slightly stronger in a single matchup but struggle with consistency. Red's Pikachu develops a distinct personality throughout the manga, showing preferences for certain battle strategies and displaying emotional reactions that go beyond simple obedience to Red's commands. This individuality makes Pikachu feel like a genuine character rather than simply a tool that Red uses in battles, creating emotional investment in Pikachu's well-being that makes its injuries at the manga's end feel more impactful. The manga's use of environmental detail during battles, showing how weather conditions, terrain features, and time of day affect strategies and outcomes, adds layers of complexity to combat that are often simplified or ignored in other adaptations. Red learns to use these environmental factors to his advantage, incorporating them into strategies that would not work in neutral, controlled settings. Blue's relationship with his Charizard develops differently from Red's relationship with Venusaur, reflecting the different personalities and training philosophies of the two trainers. Blue and Charizard share a bond based partly on mutual respect for each other's strength, while Red and Venusaur's relationship incorporates more explicit affection and emotional vulnerability. Neither approach is presented as superior, simply as different ways of forming meaningful partnerships with Pokemon. The spectators at the tournament include children who watch Red and Blue battle and dream of someday competing at the same level, creating a sense of generational continuity where each championship inspires the next generation of trainers to begin their own journeys. The manga occasionally shows glimpses of these younger trainers, reminding readers that Red and Blue are part of a larger cycle that will continue long after their individual stories conclude. Professor Oak's research into Pokemon evolution, breeding, and behavior provides the scientific foundation for much of the world's understanding of these creatures, positioning Oak as not just Red and Blue's mentor, but as a significant figure in the region's broader scholarly community. Oak's dual role as both active researcher and trainer mentor sometimes creates tensions between his obligations to his students and his commitment to advancing knowledge. Green's ability to function effectively without following the traditional gym challenge structure demonstrates that the official trainer journey represents just one possible path to success, that there are multiple ways to develop skills and build a strong team. Her success suggests that the gym system, while valuable, is not the only way to become an accomplished trainer. The manga's treatment of money and resources acknowledges that training requires financial support, that Pokemon need food and medical care that cost money, and that trainers must somehow fund their journeys. This economic reality appears more explicitly in the manga than in most other adaptations, showing characters worrying about running out of money or needing to take on odd jobs to support their continued travel. Red's decision to visit Professor Oak's lab after his defeat by Mew represents a significant moment of humility, where Red acknowledges that he needs help and guidance rather than trying to solve every problem through his own efforts alone. This willingness to seek assistance when necessary proves crucial to Red's development, allowing him to learn from Oak's experience and avoid mistakes that Red might otherwise have made. The abandoned gym in Viridian City, where Red first bonds with Bulbasaur, takes on additional significance after Red later faces Giovanni there to earn his 8th badge, creating a circular structure where locations revisited carry the weight of previous experiences. The gym transforms from a dusty, forgotten space into an active battlefield, mirroring Red's own transformation from inexperienced kid to accomplished trainer. Blue's presence in the forest during Red's first encounter with Mew creates a connection between the two rivals from the very beginning of the narrative, before they even properly know each other. This early meeting establishes their relationship as one defined partly by witnessing each other's failures and weaknesses, not just their victories and strengths. The wild Kangaskhan that Red and Blue encounter together presents a moral challenge where the clear tactical choice, capturing or defeating the Kangaskhan, conflicts with the more compassionate choice of recognizing the parent's protective instincts and leaving it alone. Red's decision to walk away from this battle demonstrates values that will become important to his character throughout the manga. Team Rocket grunts appear frequently enough throughout Red's journey to create a sense that criminal activity in the Pokemon world is common and ongoing rather than exceptional or rare. These encounters range from minor skirmishes to significant battles, showing Team Rocket as a genuine threat that operates at multiple scales from petty theft to corporate takeover. The manga's depiction of Pallet Town emphasizes its small size and isolated location, making Red's decision to leave and explore the wider world feel significant and somewhat risky. Pallet Town functions as a safe origin point that Red can always return to, but also as a place that Red must leave behind to grow and develop as a trainer. Red's relationship with his original Poliwhirl, later Poliwrath, represents one of the manga's longest running partnerships, beginning before Red even meets Professor Oak and continuing through Red's championship victory. This extended history creates deep trust between Red and Poliwrath, allowing them to work together with minimal explicit communication because they understand each other so thoroughly. The decision to have Red's first real defeat come from Mew rather than from another trainer creates a specific kind of humiliation that cuts deeper than losing to a human opponent might have. Mew represents a level of power that feels almost unreachable, making the defeat feel less like a fair competition and more like a revelation of Red's fundamental inadequacy. Blue's mockery of Red after the Mew battle, while cruel in the moment, ultimately serves Red by forcing him to confront his limitations and recognize that his self-confidence was not backed by genuine skill. This harsh truth, delivered by Blue at a vulnerable moment, catalyzes Red's decision to seek proper training rather than continuing to stumble forward blindly. The release of Pokémon from Professor Oak's lab during Red's first visit creates controlled chaos that forces Red and Oak to work together before they have established any formal trainer-mentor relationship. This shared experience builds trust and allows Oak to evaluate Red's character under pressure, ultimately leading to Oak's decision to accept Red as a student and give him both Bulbasaur and a Pokédex. The wild Machoke's appearance in the abandoned Viridian Gym introduces an element of danger that transforms what could have been a simple retrieval mission into a life-threatening situation. The battle against Machoke demonstrates both Red's quick thinking in opening the window to provide sunlight for Bulbasaur's solar beam and his willingness to trust a Pokémon he has only just met with Hoenn Professor Oak's safety. Bulbasaur's immediate response to protect Red and Oak, despite having just escaped from the lab, shows the natural protective instincts that many Pokémon possess, instincts that can form the foundation of strong partnerships when recognized and honored by trainers. Red's recognition of Bulbasaur's fear and his reassurance that he will always protect his partners creates the initial bond that will develop throughout their journey together. The manga's pacing allows for extended sequences where little happens beyond travel and small conversations, creating breathing room between major plot events that helps prevent narrative fatigue. These quieter moments serve important functions in establishing character relationships and allowing readers to feel the passage of time rather than experiencing the journey as a series of disconnected highlights. Red's Pikachu, caught during a chase through tall grass, represents one of many additions to Red's team that occur through random encounters rather than planned searches for specific Pokémon. This element of chance reflects the reality that trainers cannot fully control which Pokémon they encounter and must adapt their teams based partly on opportunity rather than pure strategic planning. The evolution of Poliwhirl into Poliwrath marks a significant milestone in Red's journey, representing both increased power and a deepening of the partnership between Red and his first Pokémon. The manga treats this evolution as a moment of shared achievement rather than something that happens to Poliwhirl independent of Red's involvement, emphasizing the collaborative nature of the trainer-Pokémon relationship. Cerulean City's gym battle against Misty introduces Red to the challenges of facing specialists who have optimized their strategies around a single type. Misty's water-type expertise forces Red to rely on Bulbasaur's grass moves and to think carefully about type matchups in ways that his earlier battles against less specialized opponents did not require. The Cascade badge that Misty awards Red after his victory carries symbolic weight, beyond its practical function of allowing Red to progress toward the Pokemon League. Each badge represents not just a victory, but acknowledgement from an established authority figure that Red has achieved a certain level of skill and deserves to continue his journey toward the championship. Misty's role extends beyond simply being a gym leader to include serving as a source of information about Team Rocket's activities in the area, demonstrating how gym leaders function as community leaders who maintain awareness of both legitimate trainer activities and criminal operations. Her willingness to share information with Red reflects her assessment that he can be trusted with sensitive details about ongoing investigations. The manga's treatment of Team Rocket as organized criminals with clear objectives and coordinated strategies makes them feel like a genuine threat rather than simple obstacles for Red to overcome. The escalation of Team Rocket's activities throughout Red's journey creates a sense of rising stakes, where each encounter reveals more about the organization's capabilities and ambitions. Red's gym challenge progression creates a structure for his journey that provides clear goals and measures of achievement, while still allowing for flexibility in the order he tackles challenges and the route he takes between cities. This structure balances player agency with narrative coherence, giving Red choices about how to proceed while ensuring that his journey follows a comprehensible path toward the Pokemon League. Blue's parallel badge collection occurs largely off-page, with readers only occasionally seeing Blue at gyms or learning through dialogue that he has earned specific badges. This parallel progression creates a sense that Blue is always nearby, just ahead or just behind Red, maintaining competitive pressure without requiring the manga to show every step of Blue's journey explicitly. Green's unconventional approach to building her team, focusing on rare Pokemon and tactical versatility rather than following type specialist or other traditional team building philosophies, demonstrates the variety of strategies that can prove effective. Her success, despite not following the established template, suggests that innovation and creativity can sometimes overcome conventional wisdom about optimal team composition. The Sylph Company building, with its multiple floors and various rooms, creates a dungeon-like environment that tests Red's stamina and resource management over an extended series of battles. The climb through Sylph Company represents one of the manga's most sustained action sequences, maintaining tension through multiple chapters as Red fights his way toward the confrontation with Giovanni at the building's summit. Team Rocket's occupation of Sylph Company demonstrates the organization's capability for large-scale operations that require significant coordination and planning. The number of grunts and the sophistication of their takeover suggests that Team Rocket possesses resources and organizational structure comparable to legitimate corporations or government agencies. Giovanni's battle style reflects his philosophy about Pokemon as tools, with his commands focusing purely on tactical advantage and showing no particular concern for his Pokemon's well-being beyond their utility in achieving victory. This approach contrasts sharply with Red's more collaborative style, where he considers his Pokemon's preferences and limits their exposure to unnecessary risk. The Master Ball prototype that Team Rocket seeks at Sylph Company represents a potential game-changing technology that would allow guaranteed capture of any Pokemon, regardless of its strength or willingness to be caught. Red's prevention of Team Rocket from obtaining this technology saves the world from a tool that could fundamentally alter the balance of power between humans and Pokemon. Giovanni's escape after his defeat at Sylph Company ensures that Team Rocket remains a threat beyond this single confrontation, that Red's victory is tactical rather than strategic. The manga acknowledges that criminal organizations are resilient, and that defeating their leader in one battle does not dismantle the entire operation. Red's journey through various routes and cities exposes him to the diversity of environments and ecosystems within the region, from forests to mountains to coastal areas. Each environment supports different Pokemon species and requires different strategies for safe travel, adding variety to Red's experiences and forcing him to adapt to changing conditions. The acquisition of new Pokemon throughout Red's journey creates ongoing decisions about team composition and which Pokemon to actively train versus keeping in storage. The manga shows Red bonding with new captures and integrating them into his battle strategies, demonstrating that team building is an ongoing process rather than something that happens once at the journey's beginning. Each new Pokemon that joins Red's team brings its own personality and preferences that Red must learn to work with, acknowledging that Pokemon are individuals with agency rather than blank slates that can be molded entirely according to trainer preferences. This individuality requires Red to adapt his training approach to each Pokemon's unique needs and characteristics. Pikachu's habit of staying outside its Pokeball and riding on Red's shoulder creates a visible symbol of their partnership that other characters notice and comment on. This constant companionship deepens their bond and allows for nonverbal communication that becomes crucial during battles when quick decisions must be made without time for lengthy discussions. The 8th badge challenge against Giovanni in Viridian City brings Red's gym challenge full circle, returning him to one of the first cities he visited, but now as a much more experienced and capable trainer. The battle represents a rematch of sorts, allowing Red to demonstrate how much he has grown since their first confrontation at Sylph Company. Giovanni's use of ground-type Pokemon in his gym exploits weaknesses in Red's team composition, forcing Red to develop strategies that do not rely on his usual type advantages. The battle tests Red's creativity and his understanding of game mechanics beyond simple type matchups, requiring him to think about terrain, move properties, and strategic positioning. The impossible matchup between Pikachu and Raiden in the final moments of the gym battle creates dramatic tension as Red faces a situation where conventional wisdom suggests he cannot win. Red's solution, using environmental features rather than relying solely on move effectiveness, demonstrates the kind of creative problem solving that separates great trainers from merely good ones. The Earth badge that Red earns from defeating Giovanni represents not just completion of his gym challenge, but validation that he has developed into a trainer capable of competing at the highest levels. With all 8 badges collected, Red becomes eligible for the Pokemon League and can begin the next phase of his journey toward the championship. The Indigo Plateau's remote location and difficult access requirements create a sense of the Pokemon League as an exclusive event that only the most dedicated and successful trainers can reach. The journey to the plateau itself serves as a final test that weeds out trainers who collected their 8 badges but lack the commitment or capability to complete the full trainer journey. Red's arrival at the Indigo Plateau marks a transition from individual journey to public spectacle, where his battles will be witnessed by thousands of spectators and broadcast throughout the region. This shift from private development to public performance creates new pressures that Red must learn to handle if he wants to succeed in the tournament. The early tournament rounds provide Red with opportunities to test his strategies against trainers from across the region whose styles and team compositions differ from those he encountered during his gym challenges. These battles serve as warm-ups while also demonstrating the high level of competition that exists among trainers who have all completed their gym challenges. The progression through tournament brackets creates a sense of mounting difficulty as Red advances through rounds and faces progressively stronger opponents. The manga shows Red adapting his strategies and making adjustments based on what he learns from each battle, treating the tournament as a learning experience rather than simply a series of fights to win. Blue's advancement through the tournament brackets mirrors Red's, creating anticipation for their eventual confrontation while also building tension as readers wonder whether one of them might be eliminated before they can face each other. The tournament structure makes their final battle feel earned rather than predetermined, as both trainers must defeat multiple strong opponents to reach the finals. Green's unexpected success in the tournament, advancing further than many experts predicted, demonstrates that unconventional approaches and tactical flexibility can overcome gaps in raw power or traditional team building. Her battles showcase different strategies than red or blue employ, expanding the range of viable approaches that the manga presents as effective. The semi-final battle between red and green provides a showcase for both trainers' skills and a testing ground for strategies that red will later use against blue in the finals. Green's ability to surprise red with Pokemon and tactics he has not seen her use before demonstrates her capacity for preparation and her understanding that revealing all of her capabilities too early would provide advantages to potential future opponents. The narrow margin of Red's victory over Green emphasizes how close the battle was and how easily the outcome could have been different with minor changes in decisions or luck. This closeness makes Red's advancement to the finals feel less like inevitable destiny and more like genuine achievement against worthy opposition. The final battle between Red and Blue lives up to the anticipation that has been building throughout the tournament and indeed throughout the entire manga. The battle showcases everything both trainers have learned during their journeys, all the Pokemon they have caught and trained, and the depth of their tactical understanding and battle experience. Blue's Ninetales presents a challenge that Red has not prepared for specifically, demonstrating Blue's ability to surprise Red even though they have battled multiple times before. The fire-type attacks put Red on the defensive and force him to react to Blue's pressure rather than implementing his own preferred strategies. The extended length of the final battle, with both trainers cycling through multiple Pokemon and the momentum shifting back and forth repeatedly, creates a sense that neither trainer has a decisive advantage. The battle feels genuinely uncertain, with realistic chances that either Red or Blue could emerge victorious, depending on tactical decisions and small bits of luck. Venusaur's matchup against Charizard represents one of the most iconic possible confrontations in the Pokemon world, grass versus fire in a battle between fully evolved starters. The manga plays this matchup straight, acknowledging the type disadvantage while showing that Venusaur's bond with Red and its defensive capabilities allow it to compete, despite unfavorable matchup on paper. Blue's attempt to overwhelm Red through raw power and type advantage represents a valid strategy that would work against most opponents. The fact that Red manages to counter this approach through combination moves and creative tactics demonstrates both Red's skill and the limitations of strategies that rely solely on straightforward advantages. Red's Desperation combination move, using Poliwrath's water vapor, Pikachu's electricity, and Venusaur's vines to create a lightning rod that strikes Charizard, represents the culmination of everything Red has learned about coordination and trust. The move only works because Red's Pokemon understand their roles without needing detailed instructions and trust Red's overall strategy, even when they cannot see the complete picture. The smoke and dust that fill the arena after Red's combination move create a moment of uncertainty where neither trainers nor spectators can determine who has won. This suspension before the results is revealed heightens the drama and allows time for the magnitude of what has just occurred to sink in for all participants. Blue's brief standing before collapsing creates a false sense that he has emerged victorious, making Red's actual victory feel more surprising and impactful when it is revealed. The delayed effect of Red's combination attack explains how both the attack could be powerful enough to decide the battle and how Blue could initially appear to have withstood it. Red's exhausted but conscious state after the smoke clears, supported by Pikachu, Poliwrath and Venusaur, who are similarly battered but still standing, creates a visual representation of survival through teamwork and mutual support. The victory belongs not to Red alone, but to Red and his team together, acknowledging their collective effort. The crowd's eruption of celebration transforms Red's personal achievement into a shared moment of regional pride and joy, with spectators treating Red's victory as meaningful for the entire community rather than just for Red himself. This public dimension of the championship adds weight to the title and begins to suggest the pressures that Red will face as champion. Green's immediate pivot to calling sponsors and pursuing business opportunities demonstrates her priorities and her understanding that tournament success has limited longevity unless converted quickly into other forms of capital. Her approach provides contrast to Red and Blue's focus on the battle itself, showing different ways of valuing and utilizing competitive success. Blue's handshake and congratulations after recovering from his defeat show his ability to accept loss gracefully and acknowledge Red's skill without bitterness or excuses. This graceful response to defeat demonstrates emotional maturity and genuine respect for Red, qualities that make Blue more than simply a rival to be overcome. Professor Oak's pride watching his two students compete at the highest level is tempered by his knowledge of what awaits Red as champion, creating a bittersweet quality to Red's victory. Oak understands that this moment represents both a culmination of Red's journey and the beginning of new challenges that may prove even more difficult than those Red has already overcome. Mew's observation from a hidden location positions this mythical Pokémon as a mysterious judge evaluating Red's worthiness for reasons that remain unexplained. The fact that Mew flies away rather than confronting Red suggests that their eventual rematch is still somewhere in the future, that Red has more growing to do before he is ready. The return to Pallet Town after Red's championship victory carries a different emotional weight than his departure at the journey's beginning, with Red now returning as a celebrated figure rather than an unknown kid with big dreams. The town's reception of Red as champion creates expectations and obligations that Red may not have anticipated when he set out to collect gym badges. The responsibility of being champion extends beyond simply defending the title against challengers to include serving as a representative of the region's trainer community and embodying ideals about the relationship between humans and Pokemon. Red's struggle with these expectations suggests that he focused so intently on becoming champion that he never fully considered what being champion would actually entail. The constant streams of challengers seeking to battle Red for his championship title creates a situation where Red cannot rest or take time for personal pursuits without feeling that he is neglecting his duties. Each challenger represents both an obligation and a potential threat, someone who could end Red's championship run if Red allows himself to become complacent or distracted. Misty's attempt to contact Red about becoming a certified gym leader represents an opportunity for Red to support someone who helped him during his own journey, but Red's inability to respond demonstrates how his championship responsibilities have consumed his life to the point where he cannot maintain basic friendships. This isolation happens gradually rather than suddenly, with each missed message and declined invitation creating distance that accumulates over time. The Pokédex's lack of updates for 2 years speaks to how completely Red has abandoned his original goal of catching every Pokémon in favor of focusing solely on maintaining his championship. The empty Pokédex entries represent dreams deferred or forgotten, sacrificed on the altar of defending a title that Red worked so hard to obtain. Professor Oak's growing concern about Red's isolation stems partly from recognition that Oak himself may have contributed to the situation by encouraging Red to pursue the championship without adequately preparing him for the loneliness and pressure that accompany the title. Oak's guilt manifests as worry that oscillates between hoping Red is simply busy and fearing that something more serious has occurred. The 2-year period between championship and disappearance allows Red to experience the full weight of his new role, to understand that being champion is not a destination, but an ongoing state that requires constant vigilance and sacrifice. The manga's choice to skip over this period, rather than showing it directly, suggests that Red's experience during these years was repetitive and grinding rather than filled with dramatic moments worth depicting. Red's isolation during his championship period reflects a broader theme in the manga about the costs of single minded ambition and the importance of maintaining relationships and diverse interests rather than defining oneself entirely through external achievements. Red's failure to maintain balance ultimately contributes to his vulnerability when he faces challenges that cannot be overcome through battle skill alone. The Elite Four's role in the Pokemon world extends beyond simply serving as the final challenge before the champion, encompassing responsibilities related to maintaining the integrity of the championship system and ensuring that champions uphold standards that the Elite Four collectively enforce. Their exact authority and the source of that authority remains somewhat ambiguous in the manga, creating uncertainty about whether their confrontation with Red was official procedure or something more irregular. The note from the Elite Four transforms from paper into symbol, representing the system's ability to reach even the champion and impose consequences for perceived failures or violations. The note's existence confirms that Red's isolation did not protect him from oversight or judgment, that being champion meant facing scrutiny from powers that Red may not have fully understood or anticipated. Pikachu's journey back to Pallet Town, while severely injured, demonstrates extraordinary determination and loyalty, qualities that make Pikachu's collapse at Professor Oak's door all the more tragic. The distance from wherever the confrontation with the Elite Four occurred to Pallet Town must have been significant, making Pikachu's survival and navigation while wounded even more remarkable. The critical condition of Pikachu when it arrives at Oak's lab suggests that the battle it fought was more intense and dangerous than any tournament match or gym battle, that the rules and limitations that normally protect Pokemon in sanctioned battles did not apply to whatever confrontation Red faced. Pikachu's injuries speak to violence that exceeds what the manga has previously shown, marking a tonal shift toward darker possibilities. Professor Oak's immediate recognition that something is seriously wrong with Red, based solely on Pikachu's appearance and the note from the Elite Four, demonstrates Oak's deep familiarity with the system's inner workings and the dangers that champions face. Oak's reaction combines professional knowledge with personal fear, understanding both intellectually and emotionally what Pikachu's condition likely means for Red. Misty's escalating worry on the phone reflects her transition from mild concern about losing contact with a friend to genuine fear that Red may be in serious danger or already beyond help. Her questions to Oak become more urgent as she processes the implications of Pikachu's injuries and the Elite Four's involvement, recognizing that this situation extends beyond simple neglect or isolation into territory that suggests active harm. The manga's decision to end Red's arc with his disappearance rather than his triumph creates a subversive narrative structure that refuses to provide the expected satisfying conclusion to a hero's journey. Red achieves his goal of becoming champion, but the story continues past that achievement to show the aftermath, revealing that the supposed happy ending was actually just the beginning of a new and more difficult chapter. Red's missing status at the manga's conclusion leaves multiple possibilities open, from temporary defeat and recovery to permanent disappearance or even death. The manga does not commit to any single interpretation, allowing the ambiguity to create ongoing tension and speculation about what actually happened during Red's confrontation with the Elite Four and where he might be now. The opening of a door for a new trainer at the manga's end suggests that the cycle will continue, that Red's disappearance creates a vacuum that someone else will eventually fill by rising through the ranks and potentially facing the same challenges that Red encountered. This cyclical quality transforms Red's story from an isolated tragedy into a commentary on systemic problems that persist across generations of trainers. The manga's treatment of Pokemon centers as places of healing and rest creates safe spaces throughout the world where trainers can recover between battles and receive medical care for their partners. These centers function as crucial infrastructure that makes extended journeys possible, providing services that trainers could not easily access otherwise. Nurse Joy's presence at Pokemon centers throughout the region, appearing identical across multiple locations, represents one of the manga's few concessions to game mechanics that don't have realistic explanations. The manga does not attempt to explain this phenomenon, simply accepting it as a feature of the world that trainers rely upon without questioning. The various routes between cities each present distinct challenges and environmental conditions that affect which Pokemon can be found there and what strategies trainers need to employ for safe passage. Red's navigation of these routes demonstrates growing competence in outdoor survival and wilderness travel, skills that prove as important as battle ability for completing a successful trainer journey. Wild Pokemon behavior in the manga reflects genuine animal-like territoriality and defensive aggression, rather than the more cooperative disposition that wild Pokemon display in some other adaptations. This realistic approach to wild Pokemon encounters creates genuine danger that trainers must respect and prepare for, rather than assuming that all Pokemon are naturally friendly toward humans. The manga's depiction of cities as distinct locations with unique cultures and characteristics helps create a sense of the region as a diverse place where different communities have developed different relationships with Pokemon and different approaches to training. Each city Red visits expands his understanding of the variety of ways that humans and Pokemon coexist. Pokemarts scattered throughout the region provide essential supplies that trainers need for their journeys, from Pokeballs for catching new Pokemon to potions for healing minor injuries. The existence of this commercial infrastructure supporting trainer journeys suggests that the practice of traveling to collect badges and compete in the league is common enough to sustain an entire economic sector. The various types of Pokeballs available for purchase, each with different properties and success rates against different Pokemon, add strategic considerations to the act of catching wild Pokemon. Red's decisions about which type of Pokeball to use in different situations demonstrate his growing understanding of the tools available to trainers and how to employ them effectively. The regional Pokedex that Professor Oak provides to Red contains entries for Pokemon native to the region, creating a concrete goal that Red can work toward and measure his progress against. Each new entry represents both a Pokemon caught and knowledge gained, contributing to the scientific understanding of Pokemon biology and behavior. The evolution mechanics that govern when and how Pokemon transform into more powerful forms reflect both level of experience and strength of bond between Pokemon and trainer. Some evolutions occur automatically when certain conditions are met, while others require specific items or special circumstances, adding variety to the ways that Pokemon can grow stronger. Red's strategic decisions about when to allow or encourage evolution versus keeping Pokemon in earlier forms reflect understanding that evolution changes more than just power levels, affecting move pools, battle strategies, and even personality traits. Some Pokemon benefit from remaining in pre-evolved forms, longer to learn specific moves, requiring trainers to balance immediate power gains against long-term strategic considerations. The type matchup system that determines which Pokemon and moves are effective against others creates a rock, paper, scissors dynamic that rewards strategic thinking and team diversity over simple power leveling. Red's growing mastery of type matchups and ability to predict opponents' choices based on type considerations demonstrates his development as a tactical thinker. The existence of dual-type Pokemon that combine two type categories creates additional complexity in battle calculations, with some combinations offering unique defensive properties, while others create exploitable weaknesses. Red learns to both utilize dual-type Pokemon effectively on his own team and to identify and exploit the weaknesses that dual typing creates in opponents' teams. Status conditions that can afflict Pokemon during battles, from paralysis to sleep to poisoning, add another layer of strategic consideration beyond simple damage calculation. Red's understanding of when to inflict status conditions versus when to focus on direct damage demonstrates sophisticated battle sense that develops through repeated experience. Weather effects that can be activated during battles, changing the effectiveness of certain moves and types, create dynamic battlefield conditions that skilled trainers can manipulate to their advantage. Red's incorporation of weather effects into his strategies represents advanced tactical thinking that goes beyond straightforward type matchups. The held items that Pokemon can carry into battle, providing various benefits from increased power to healing effects, represent another dimension of team building that trainers must consider. Red's decisions about which items to give to which Pokemon reflect understanding of both his team's needs and the strategies he plans to employ in upcoming battles. The friendship and happiness systems that affect Pokemon performance and evolution possibilities create mechanical representations of the bonds between trainers and their partners. Red's high friendship levels with his core team members translate into tangible battle benefits, rewarding the time and care he has invested in building relationships with his Pokemon. The breeding mechanics that allow trainers to produce new Pokemon with inherited moves and abilities create possibilities for strategic planning that extend beyond simply catching wild Pokemon. While Red does not engage extensively with breeding during his journey, the manga acknowledges that some trainers specialize in this aspect of Pokemon training. The legendary Pokemon that exist in the region as unique individuals rather than species with populations represent aspirational goals that most trainers never achieve. Red's encounter with Mew early in his journey provides motivation and humility, showing him a level of power that he must work toward being able to face. The fossil Pokemon that can be revived from ancient remains through scientific processes demonstrate the historical depth of the Pokemon world and suggest that Pokemon have existed alongside humans for thousands of years. The manga references these ancient Pokemon without showing Red obtaining any, acknowledging their existence as part of the world's lore. The regional variants and unique forms that certain Pokemon species take in different geographical areas reflect evolutionary adaptation to local environments. While Red's journey occurs primarily in a single region, the manga hints at broader diversity that exists in other parts of the Pokemon world. The competitive battling metagame that exists at the highest levels of play represents a community of elite trainers who analyze strategies, identify optimal team compositions, and develop counter strategies to commonly used approaches. Red's entry into this competitive world through the tournament exposes him to levels of strategic sophistication that exceed what he encountered during his gym challenges. The training regimens that successful trainers employ to prepare their Pokemon for high-level competition involve more than simply battling repeatedly, including conditioning exercises, move practice, and strategic drills. The manga occasionally shows Red training his Pokemon outside of battle contexts, demonstrating the work that happens between the dramatic confrontations. The psychological aspects of competitive battling, including managing stress, Maintaining focus under pressure and reading opponents' intentions prove as important as technical knowledge of types and moves. Red's ability to remain calm during crucial moments and make sound decisions when outcomes hang in the balance represents mental strength developed through experience. The role of prediction and mind games in high level battles, where trainers must anticipate their opponent's strategies and make choices that counter expected moves, creates a chess like quality to elite competition. Red's final battle against Blue showcases this psychological dimension, with both trainers attempting to predict and counter each other's plans. The importance of team synergy, where Pokemon support each other through complementary abilities and strategic combinations, exceeds the sum of individual Pokemon strength. Red's combination, move in the final battle, demonstrates perfect team synergy, with three Pokemon working together to create an effect that none could achieve alone. The concept of momentum in battles, where success breeds confidence and failure can create cascading problems, affects both trainers and Pokemon psychologically. Red's ability to maintain composure when behind and avoid overconfidence when ahead reflects emotional maturity that contributes to his success. The role of luck and chance in determining battle outcomes creates uncertainty that even the most skilled trainers must accept and work with. Critical hits, move accuracy variations, and other random elements mean that perfect play does not guarantee victory, adding realism and drama to competitive battles. The scouting and intelligence gathering that serious competitors engage in before major tournaments, studying opponents' previous battles and identifying patterns in their strategies, represents a level of preparation that exceeds casual battling. Red's relative inexperience with this aspect of competition may have left him vulnerable to opponents who had studied his battle history. The evolution of battle formats across different competitive contexts, from single battles to double battles to more complex formats, requires trainers to develop different skills and strategies. While Red's tournament primarily features single battles, the manga acknowledges that other formats exist and demand different approaches. The role of coaching and outside advice during tournaments, with some trainers having mentors or teams of analysts supporting their competition, creates advantages that independent trainers like Red do not enjoy. Red's relative isolation from this support structure may have contributed to his difficulties during his championship period. The media coverage and public attention that successful trainers receive transforms them from private individuals into public figures whose battles and decisions are analyzed and discussed widely. Red's discomfort with this aspect of championship suggests that he was unprepared for the loss of privacy that accompanies elite success. The sponsorship and commercial opportunities that become available to successful trainers create financial incentives that can affect decisions about which battles to accept and how to present oneself publicly. Green's immediate pursuit of these opportunities contrasts with Red's apparent indifference to the commercial aspects of championship. The role of regional politics and power structures in determining championship procedures and Elite Four operations suggests that the trainer journey exists within larger institutional contexts. Red's conflict with the Elite Four may reflect tensions between his independent approach and institutional expectations about how champions should conduct themselves. The historical precedents for champions who struggled with isolation and pressure suggest that Red's difficulties are not unique, but represent a recurring pattern that the system has failed to address adequately. Professor Oak's recognition of this pattern implies guilt that the system continues to produce champions who face predictable challenges without adequate support. The alternative paths that former champions have taken after stepping down or being defeated include retirement from competition, transitioning to research or administration, and continuing to battle as non-champions. Professor Oak's choice to focus on research represents one successful adaptation to post-championship life, though the manga suggests this path is not available or appealing to all former champions. The mentorship relationships between former champions and rising trainers create generational connections that pass down knowledge and wisdom gained from experience. Professor Oak's mentorship of Red and Blue represents this tradition, though Oak's inability to prevent Red's eventual crisis suggests limitations in what mentorship alone can accomplish. The broader Pokemon world that exists beyond the region where Red's journey occurs contains other leagues, other champions, and different approaches to the relationship between humans and Pokemon. The manga occasionally references this larger world without exploring it directly, maintaining focus on Red's regional journey while acknowledging that his experiences represent just one part of a much larger phenomenon. The scientific community that studies Pokemon includes researchers like Professor Oak, who work to understand evolution, behavior, ecology, and other aspects of Pokemon biology. Red's Pokedex contributions were intended to support this scientific work, making his abandonment of Pokedex entries a loss, not just for Red personally, but for the broader research community. The conservation efforts that exist to protect endangered Pokemon species and habitats reflect growing awareness that human activity can threaten Pokemon populations. While the manga does not explore these issues extensively, their existence in the background suggests environmental consciousness within the Pokemon world. The ethical debates about the morality of catching and battling with Pokemon remain unresolved in the manga, with different characters holding different views about what constitutes appropriate treatment of Pokemon. Giovanni's utilitarian philosophy represents one extreme, while Red's partnership model represents another, with most trainers falling somewhere between these poles. The role of Pokemon in human society extends beyond battling to include companionship, assistance with labor, and participation in various industries and services. The manga shows glimpses of these non-battle roles, acknowledging that most Pokemon in the world are not involved in competitive training at all. The domestication history of Pokemon species and how certain types came to live alongside humans in cities and towns suggests a long coevolution between humans and Pokemon. The manga treats this history as background context rather than exploring it directly, accepting the current state of human Pokemon relations as the starting point for its narrative. The wild Pokemon populations that exist in forests, mountains, and other natural areas maintain ecosystems that function independently of human activity. Red's encounters with these wild populations during his journey show both the beauty and the danger of Pokemon in their natural habitats. The migration patterns and seasonal behaviors that affect Pokemon distributions throughout the year create temporal variations in which Pokemon can be found in different locations. While Red's journey occurs over a compressed timeline, the manga acknowledges that longer journeys might need to account for seasonal changes. The territorial behaviors that many Pokemon species exhibit create natural boundaries within wild areas, with powerful individuals or groups controlling access to resources. Red learns to recognize and respect these territorial claims, avoiding unnecessary conflicts with wild Pokemon who are simply defending their homes. The social structures that exist within Pokemon populations, from pack hierarchies to breeding pairs to complex colonies, demonstrate sophisticated behaviors that parallel those found in real-world animals. The manga's treatment of Pokemon as intelligent beings with their own social lives adds depth to the world and raises questions about the ethics of removing individuals from these social contexts. The communication methods that Pokemon use among themselves, from vocalizations to body language to other signals, remain partially mysterious to humans. Red's growing ability to read his own Pokemon's communication attempts demonstrates deepening bonds, but the manga acknowledges limits to human understanding of Pokemon languages. The myths and legends that exist in Pokemon world folklore telling stories about ancient Pokemon and historical events, provide cultural context for the modern trainer journey. Some of these legends prove to be based in truth, as Red's encounter with the legendary Pokemon Mew demonstrates. The religious and spiritual beliefs that some characters hold about Pokemon, viewing certain species as sacred or treating Pokemon with ritual respect, add cultural diversity to the world. The manga treats these beliefs as valid perspectives without endorsing or challenging them directly. The archaeological evidence of ancient civilizations that worked with Pokemon in ways that differ from modern practices suggests that human Pokemon relationships have evolved over time. The ruins and artifacts that Red encounters during his journey hint at this deep history without explaining it comprehensively. The technological developments that have shaped modern Pokemon training, from Pokeballs to Pokedexes to healing machines at Pokemon centers, represent relatively recent innovations that have made trainer journeys more accessible and safer. The manga accepts these technologies as background elements without exploring their origins or development. The economic systems that support trainer journeys, from prize money earned through battles to government subsidies for Pokemon centers, remain largely invisible but essential for maintaining the current model of young trainers traveling the region. The manga hints at these economic underpinnings without examining them in detail, focusing instead on individual experiences. The educational systems that exist alongside traditional schooling to teach children about Pokemon, including trainer schools and professor led programs, provide foundational knowledge that trainers build upon during their journeys. Red's relative lack of formal education in this area makes his success more impressive, but also contributes to gaps in his knowledge that more systematically trained individuals might not have. The family dynamics that affect trainer journeys, with parents supporting or opposing their children's decisions to leave home and pursue championships, add emotional complexity to what might otherwise seem like purely individual choices. The manga shows little of Red's family life, suggesting either estrangement or a family situation that requires minimal attention. The age considerations that determine when young people are permitted to begin trainer journeys reflect cultural beliefs about maturity and responsibility. Red's youth during his championship run makes his achievement more remarkable, but also raises questions about whether someone his age is truly prepared for the pressures of being champion. The gender dynamics within trainer culture, with roughly equal participation but subtle differences in how male and female trainers are perceived and treated, appear in Green's experiences and her pragmatic responses to systemic obstacles. The manga acknowledges these dynamics without making them a primary focus of its narrative. The class and wealth considerations that affect who can afford to undertake trainer journeys and who must work to support themselves create inequalities that the manga acknowledges through characters' different financial situations. Red's apparent financial stability allows him to focus entirely on his journey rather than needing to work simultaneously. The regional identity and pride that people feel toward their local trainers and gym leaders creates emotional investment in competitive outcomes that extends beyond the immediate participants. Red's championship victory becomes a source of pride for Pallet Town and the surrounding area, transforming his personal achievement into a communal celebration. The media infrastructure that covers trainer battles and championships, from commentators to broadcasts to print coverage, creates public narratives about trainers that may or may not align with trainers' self-perceptions. Red's relationship with this media attention appears uncomfortable, suggesting he values privacy that championship makes increasingly difficult to maintain. The fan culture that develops around successful trainers, with admirers seeking autographs and emulating their heroes' styles, creates additional pressures and obligations for those who achieve public recognition. Red's apparent discomfort with fans and public attention may have contributed to his isolation, as he withdrew from public life to avoid uncomfortable interactions. The rival dynamics that exist not just between red and blue, but among all trainers competing for limited spots in tournaments, create a culture of competition that can be both motivating and exhausting. The manga shows this competitive culture primarily through Red's perspective, acknowledging that other trainers face similar pressures and challenges. The mentor student relationships that form between experienced trainers and novices create informal educational networks that supplement official institutions. Professor Oak's mentorship of Red and Blue represents a formalized version of these relationships, but the manga suggests that informal mentorship occurs throughout trainer culture, the gym leader career path that some trainers pursue as an alternative to indefinitely chasing championships provides stable employment and respected social status. Misty's path toward becoming a certified gym leader represents this alternative trajectory, showing that success in the Pokemon world can take multiple forms beyond simply becoming champion. The Elite Four membership that represents the pinnacle of competitive battling below championship level creates an elite class of trainers whose power and influence extend beyond their combat abilities. The manga's limited exploration of the Elite Four leaves their motivations and operations largely mysterious, contributing to their threatening presence in the narrative. The championship tenure that determines how long an individual remains champion before being defeated or choosing to step down varies widely, with some champions holding the title for years, while others lose it quickly. Red's 2-year tenure falls somewhere in the middle range, neither impressively long nor embarrassingly short. The post-championship careers that former champions pursue reflect the difficulty of maintaining identity and purpose after achieving one's primary goal. The manga suggests that this transition represents one of the most challenging periods in a champion's life, potentially more difficult than the journey to the championship itself. The institutional memory that exists within Pokemon League organizations, recording the history of past champions and the challenges they faced, could potentially provide guidance for current champions if accessed and utilized effectively. Red's apparent lack of connection to this institutional knowledge may have left him unprepared for challenges that previous champions successfully navigated. The support systems that could theoretically help champions manage stress and isolation exist but may be underutilized or poorly designed for the specific pressures that championship creates. The manga implies that these systems failed Red, whether because he did not seek help or because help was not offered effectively. The privacy protections that champions might expect or desire conflict with public interest in their activities and lives, creating tensions that champions must navigate without clear guidelines or precedents. Red's inability to maintain privacy while serving as champion may have contributed to his decision to withdraw from public life entirely. The succession planning that organizations might implement to ensure smooth transitions between champions appears absent or inadequate, leaving champions to figure out retirement or transition processes on their own. Red's disappearance creates a crisis partly because no clear mechanism exists for handling a champion who cannot or will not fulfill their duties. The accountability measures that could theoretically apply to champions who fail to meet their responsibilities appear weak or non-existent, suggesting that the championship system relies heavily on champions' voluntary compliance with unstated expectations. The Elite Four's confrontation with Red may represent an attempt to enforce accountability in a system that lacks formal mechanisms for doing so. The cultural significance of the championship within the region's broader society elevates champions to a status that may be difficult for young people to handle psychologically. Red's struggle with championship suggests that the honor and recognition that come with the title carry psychological costs that outweigh the benefits. The historical examples of champions who successfully managed the pressures of the title could provide models for current champions to emulate, but this knowledge appears not to have been effectively communicated to Red. Professor Oak's experience as a former champion represents a potential source of guidance that Red either did not seek or did not receive adequately. The peer support that champions might receive from other current or former champions could help address isolation and provide understanding that non champions cannot offer. Red's lack of connection to this potential support network suggests either that such networks do not exist or that Red was unaware of or unwilling to access them. The therapeutic resources that could help champions process the psychological impacts of their experiences appear either unavailable or stigmatized within trainer culture. The manga's silence on mental health resources suggests that trainer culture may not adequately recognize or address psychological challenges. The work life balance that champions must negotiate between their duties as champion and their personal lives and relationships appears difficult to achieve without explicit guidance and support. Red's failure to maintain relationships during his championship tenure suggests that the demands of the role make balance extremely difficult, if not impossible. The boundary setting that champions need to establish between their public role and private self requires skills that young champions may not possess and that no one appears to teach. Red's inability to set effective boundaries may have allowed the championship to consume his entire identity. The self care practices that could help champions maintain physical and mental health during their tenure require awareness and discipline that young people often lack. The manga provides no indication that Red developed effective self care practices, suggesting that he may have burned out, partly due to neglecting his own well being. The meaning making that individuals must engage in to maintain purpose and motivation beyond achieving their primary goal represents a philosophical challenge that many young champions may not be equipped to address. Red's apparent loss of purpose after becoming champion suggests that he defined himself entirely through his goal and had no framework for finding meaning once that goal was achieved. The legacy considerations that champions might contemplate regarding how they want to be remembered and what impact they want to have on trainer culture represent long-term thinking that young champions may not naturally engage in. Red's championship period shows little evidence of legacy planning, suggesting he focused on immediate challenges rather than longer-term impact. The skill transferability that could allow champions to apply their abilities to other domains and create new challenges once championship becomes routine represents a path that some former champions successfully navigate. Red's apparent inability to find new challenges or transfer his skills to other pursuits suggests limitations in either his creativity or his exposure to alternative possibilities. The social connections that provide meaning and support beyond competitive achievement represent protective factors that could buffer against isolation and burnout. Red's deteriorating relationships during his championship period left him increasingly vulnerable to the psychological impacts of isolation. The personal growth that could occur during championship if individuals remain open to learning and developing represents an opportunity that some champions seize while others miss. Red's championship period appears to have involved little personal growth beyond his immediate role as champion, suggesting missed opportunities for broader development. The philosophical questions about success, purpose, and identity that championship raises require thoughtful engagement that young champions may lack the maturity or guidance to undertake effectively. Red's struggles suggest he never developed satisfying answers to these questions, leaving him adrift despite his external success. The narrative that individuals tell themselves about their own experiences shapes their interpretation of events and their ability to derive meaning from challenges. Red's internal narrative during his championship period remains opaque to readers, but his ultimate disappearance suggests a narrative that became increasingly dark and hopeless. The resilience factors that allow some individuals to weather extreme stress while others break down under similar conditions, include both innate characteristics and learned skills. Red's breakdown under championship pressure suggests either insufficient resilience or challenges that exceeded even strong resilience could handle. The turning points that mark shifts from struggling but coping to genuine crisis often pass unrecognized until after the fact, making intervention difficult even when warning signs exist. Red's gradual isolation and disengagement represented warning signs that apparently no one recognized as indicating serious crisis until after the confrontation with the Elite Four. The intervention possibilities that existed before Red's disappearance required someone to recognize the severity of his situation and take action despite Red's apparent resistance to help. The manga suggests that potential interventions either did not occur or occurred too late to prevent the crisis. The system failures that contributed to Red's crisis extend beyond individual relationships to encompass institutional structures that create vulnerable champions without adequate support. The manga implies that Red's disappearance represents a systemic problem rather than purely an individual failure. The responsibility distribution for Red's situation involves multiple parties, from Red himself to Professor Oak, to the Elite Four to the broader championship system. The manga resists simple assignment of blame, suggesting that responsibility is diffuse and that fixing the problem requires systemic rather than individual changes. The lessons that could be learned from Red's experience to prevent future champions from facing similar crises require honest examination of what went wrong and willingness to change established practices. The manga's open ending leaves unclear whether anyone will learn appropriate lessons or whether the cycle will simply repeat with future champions. The documentation of Red's disappearance and the events leading to it could serve educational purposes for future champions if properly preserved and analyzed. However, the manga suggests that institutional memory within the championship system may be inadequate for this purpose. The search efforts that might be undertaken to find Red and determine what happened during his confrontation with the Elite Four remain unshown in the manga, leaving his fate permanently ambiguous. This narrative choice transforms Red from a character whose story concludes into a mystery that continues beyond the manga's pages. The impact of Red's disappearance on those who knew him, particularly Professor Oak, Blue, Green, and Misty, represents emotional consequences that extend beyond Red himself. The manga shows the beginning of this impact through Oak and Misty's conversation, but does not follow these characters as they process Red's loss. The championship vacuum created by Red's disappearance raises practical questions about succession and governance that the manga does not address. Who becomes champion when the current champion disappears rather than being defeated? How long must the region wait before declaring the championship vacant and organizing a new tournament? The precedents that Red's case sets for future handling of champion disappearances or incapacitations could influence how the system evolves, assuming that institutions learn from this experience. The manga's silence on institutional response leaves this evolution to readers' imagination. The mythology that may develop around Red's disappearance, transforming him from a person into a legend or cautionary tale, represents the cultural processing of traumatic events. Red's story contains elements that could support multiple mythological interpretations, from tragic hero to victim of systemic cruelty to individual who failed to live up to responsibility. The truth about what happened during Red's confrontation with the Elite Four may never be fully known, with different parties potentially holding different pieces of information that never get assembled into a complete picture. This epistemological limitation reflects real-world situations where understanding remains perpetually incomplete. The justice considerations regarding whether anyone should be held accountable for Red's disappearance depend on understanding what actually occurred and whether any parties acted wrongfully. The manga provides insufficient information to make these determinations, leaving justice questions unresolved. The healing process for those affected by Red's disappearance requires time and support that the manga does not show, ending before characters have had opportunity to process their loss and begin recovery. This truncation leaves readers with the immediate impact of disappearance without seeing longer term adaptation. The new trainer, who will eventually rise to face the challenges that Red faced, carries the weight of stepping into a vacancy created by tragedy. This unnamed successor inherits not just an empty championship, but also a system that destroyed the previous champion. The hope that circumstances might be different for future champions requires believing that Red's experience will catalyze meaningful change rather than simply being accepted as an unfortunate but inevitable outcome. The manga's ending provides no assurance that such change will occur. The cycle of trainer journeys, championships, and champion burnout may continue indefinitely unless fundamental changes address the systemic issues that the manga identifies through Red's story. This possibility of endless repetition transforms Red's tragedy from unique misfortune into representative example of broader patterns. The courage required to begin a trainer journey, knowing the potential costs, represents a quality that all trainers must possess to varying degrees. The manga suggests that this courage may be partially founded on ignorance of true costs, with young trainers unable to fully understand what they are committing to until they are too deeply involved to easily turn back. The value of trainer journeys despite their costs remains an open question that the manga poses without answering definitively. Red's story could be read as either an indictment of the entire championship system or as an exploration of what can go wrong within a generally valuable tradition. The agency that trainers possess in shaping their own experiences and outcomes exists within constraints imposed by systems, culture, and circumstances. Red's story illustrates both the power of individual choices and the limitations that external factors place on individual agency. The responsibility that individuals bear for their own well-being must be balanced against the support that communities and systems should provide. Red's isolation represents both a personal choice and a systemic failure, with responsibility distributed across multiple parties. The alternative futures that might have existed for Red, if different choices had been made at various points, create counterfactual scenarios that highlight how contingent his actual path was. Small decisions that seemed insignificant at the time accumulated into trajectories that ultimately determined outcomes. The relationships that Red allowed to deteriorate during his championship period could have provided support networks that might have helped him navigate challenges more successfully. Misty's unanswered attempts at contact represent missed opportunities for connection that might have prevented or mitigated Red's isolation. The priorities that Red maintained during his championship, focusing exclusively on defending his title at the expense of all other goals and relationships, reflect a value system that proved unsustainable. The manga suggests that more balanced priorities might have allowed Red to remain champion while maintaining well-being. The feedback mechanisms that could have alerted Red to his deteriorating situation appear to have been ignored or non-existent, allowing problems to compound until they reached crisis levels. Professor Oak's concern came too late to prevent the crisis, suggesting that earlier intervention might have been possible if warning signs had been recognized sooner. The personal qualities that Red possessed, including determination, tactical intelligence, and capacity for deep bonds with Pokémon, served him well during his journey to championship, but proved insufficient for managing the challenges of being champion. This mismatch between skills required for achieving goals and skills required for managing success represents a common human challenge. The external validation that Red may have relied upon to maintain self-worth during his championship period represents a vulnerable foundation that collapsed when maintaining public approval became too burdensome. Developing internal sources of validation might have provided more sustainable motivation. The identity formation that occurs during late adolescence coincided with Red's championship period, potentially creating conflicts between his developing sense of self and the public role he was expected to inhabit. The manga hints at, but does not explore deeply, the developmental challenges that young champions face. The freedom that Red sacrificed by becoming champion, including the ability to travel spontaneously or pursue personal interests without public scrutiny, represents costs that may not have been apparent until after achievement. The championship that seemed like freedom to pursue his passion ultimately became a cage that constrained his choices. The expectations that others placed on Red as champion may have differed from expectations Red placed on himself, creating conflicts about what being champion should mean. The manga does not clarify whether Red's isolation stemmed from his own perfectionism or from external pressure, suggesting both factors likely contributed. The comparison that Red may have made between his championship experience and his expectations of what championship would be like could have created disappointment that contributed to his struggles. The gap between anticipated and actual experience represents another source of potential distress. The meaning that Red extracted from his daily activities as champion appears to have diminished over time, with repeated title defenses becoming routine rather than fulfilling. This loss of meaning in activities that once brought satisfaction represents a psychological challenge that requires addressing through finding new sources of purpose. The growth opportunities that existed within Red's championship role required recognition and active pursuit to realize. Red's apparent stagnation during his championship period suggests he either did not recognize these opportunities or lacked energy to pursue them while managing immediate demands. The communities of practice that Red could have joined, connecting with other current or former champions to share experiences and strategies for managing the role, appear not to have been accessed. Whether such communities exist within the manga's world remains unclear, but their absence represents a missed resource. The documentation practices that Red could have employed, keeping journals or records of his experiences as champion, might have helped him process challenges and recognize patterns in his struggles. The absence of such documentation means that Red's inner experience during his championship period remains largely unknown even to those closest to him. The help-seeking behaviors that could have connected Red to support resources require both awareness that help is needed and knowledge of where help might be found. Red's failure to seek help suggests either that he did not recognize the severity of his situation or that he believed help was unavailable or would be ineffective. The stigma that may exist within trainer culture around admitting struggles or asking for help could have prevented Red from seeking support, even if he recognized his need for it. This cultural factor represents a systemic issue that affects all trainers, not just champions. The vulnerability that asking for help represents a challenge for someone like Red, who built his identity partly on self-reliance and individual achievement. Admitting that he could not handle championship alone might have felt like admitting failure or weakness. The trust that seeking help requires, believing that others will respond with genuine support rather than judgment or exploitation, may have been damaged by Red's experiences during his championship period. Negative interactions with fans, media, or others could have made Red increasingly wary of opening up to anyone. The timing of potential interventions matters significantly, with early interventions more likely to succeed than waiting until situations reach crisis levels. The manga suggests that by the time people recognized Red's struggles as serious, the window for effective intervention had already closed. The persistence that effective intervention sometimes requires Continuing to reach out and offer support, even when initial attempts are rebuffed, demands patience and commitment that not everyone can sustain. Misty's attempts to contact Red appear to have eventually stopped, suggesting that even well meaning potential supporters have limits to their persistence. The professional expertise that might be needed to effectively help someone in Red's situation may exceed what friends and family can provide, even with the best intentions. The manga does not indicate whether professional mental health resources exist in its world or whether Red had access to such resources. The systemic changes that might prevent future champions from experiencing similar crises require institutional recognition that problems exist and willingness to invest resources in solutions. The manga provides no indication that such recognition or willingness exists within the Pokemon League system. The individual stories of all trainers who attempt championship journeys, not just those who succeed like Red, contain valuable lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the costs of ambition. The manga's focus on Red's exceptional success and ultimate crisis leaves unexplored the experiences of more typical trainers whose journeys end differently. The paths not taken by Red at various decision points throughout his journey represent alternative versions of his story that might have led to different outcomes. These counterfactual paths remind readers that narrative trajectories are not predetermined but result from accumulated choices and circumstances. The inheritance that Red leaves for future trainers includes both his achievements and his disappearance, creating a complex legacy that could inspire or caution depending on how his story is interpreted and retold. Future trainers will navigate their journeys knowing Red's story, though they may draw different lessons from it. The questions that Red's story raises about the purpose and structure of trainer journeys, the costs of competitive achievement, and the support systems that could help individuals manage success remain largely unanswered by the manga. These open questions invite readers to continue thinking about the story long after finishing it. The silence that surrounds Red's ultimate fate creates space for imagination and interpretation that definitive answers would foreclose. This narrative choice respects readers' intelligence and creativity while maintaining the mystery that makes Red's story compelling. The beginning that waits beyond the manga's ending, with a new trainer preparing to start their own journey toward championship, suggests cycles that continue regardless of individual tragedies. The world moves forward, even as questions about Red remain unresolved. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet moments, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Let it play while you rest. You might discover something gentle before sleep takes you again.